by Supervisor Alvarez. If you'll all please rise as you're able. Thank you.
Okay, please pray with us. Most gracious God, thank you for enabling us to gather here today. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to serve this great county. Now, as we go about doing the business set forth today, help us to keep you first in everything that we say and do. Bless all of us with the proper knowledge, wisdom, and understanding so that we all may prosper. Most of all, bind us together in a spirit of love which surpasses all things. It is in your most holy name that we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first item on the agenda is the chairman's comments. I don't have too many comments today, but I would like to say that this today kind of kicks off the budget process for the county, and we're still very early in the process. We are not going to make any decisions today to set tax rates or water and sewer fees or adopt a budget or any of that. So it's early in the process, but it's not that early in the process for the people who have done the work to prepare to get us to where we are today. So I just wanted to thank all of the folks on staff and schools that have put in all the work to get us to the kind of launch off point where we start to hear the budget presentations. So thank you very much for your efforts. And with a little caveat that the General Assembly is still in session, so we don't have any final numbers, so there may be some adjustments going forward, depending on their largesse and their generosity with the local governments. So, but thanks again for all the work you've done so far. The next item is the citizen comment period. I'll go ahead and open up the citizen comment period. Anyone who would like to come forward and address this group, please come forward now.
Mr. Chairman, Jonathan Lyle, 1521 Mannequin Road. Mr. Creasy, it is very good to see you back in that seat. I can
Amen.
only tell you how they misbehaved in your absence. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and staff particularly, I really was in geek heaven when you went through the community or the development impact process that was presented at the last meeting. I really do want to appreciate, and perhaps, Mr. Chairman, to echo some of your comments, investing that kind of county resource in that kind of model is something I appreciate you did not take lightly, but I think the end result is something that is a great starting point. I have been following some of the soil and water conservation legislation proposed or otherwise down at the General Assembly. And on the eastern part of the Commonwealth, they have been looking at riparian rights as well as water table usage. And while this rascal is not even out of the box yet, if there was a possibility of adding what water consumption impact would be into that model and how the hydrologist would be able to help you do that, I can't say. But as our water tables are impacted by 300 roof developments and others that are not on a water sewer system, at some point that's going to create a need for a water sewer system, which right now, as the model I saw presented, doesn't take into account what growth might have on a significantly expensive capital situation. How that can be done, I don't know. But as I see other communities, particularly east of us, wrestle with that, I have a premonition that it could be something that Goochland could be looking at down the road. And Mr. Badesky has much more experience with MS4 communities and the expense of water treatment and just water sewer systems. So great system. I'm really excited to, and that's saying a lot for me, to see that kind of numerical tool available. But I do believe that it's a good starting point, that there are going to be other capital investments that growth, which is coming and will always be with us, is going to create, and particularly water. I mean, it's one of those essentials, and as some part of the water and soil conservation effort out here, I just would bring that to your attention. But really, really neat presentation. I appreciate that the county is invested in that, and I'll sit down. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Lyle. Anyone else like to come forward? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the citizen comment period. That brings us to new business. The first item of new business is a presentation of the County Administrator's FY 2019 proposed budget.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to come in front of you this afternoon. As annual tradition begs, it's my pleasure to introduce to you the County Administrator's proposed fiscal year 19 budget. I think I always do it at the end, but I think I need to start with thank you this time. Barbara and her team, Kathleen, all the departments, our partners at the school system, our constitutional officers, without all their efforts to help us understand priorities in this process, we'll talk a little bit more about that. We are not in a position to recommend to you the budget we have here today. The team that we have with our partners, they bring to us professionally thought out needs of what they believe their departments need to support this community in the years to come. There's been times that I've heard the budget process is considered a wish list. I will tell you, this is a professionally needs-driven budget. The departments that presented requests to us believe that in order to serve the demands on their departments, there were needs that are going to be in excess of what we're going to recommend to you today. But they always look for efficiencies. They always look for opportunities to do the best they can with the resources they're provided, and know that not everything makes the cut. And working with a group of professionals makes this presentation to you today much easier. So with that, just want to talk a little bit about where our residents that are not with us here in the room today. As Mr. Peterson said, this is the very beginning of a process. While the departments have been working on this since October, our public engagement process really begins in earnest here today. The document that we've shared with the board members, the full budget and all of the details, is found here at this web link. It's important for those that aren't as familiar with our budget process. I want to be very clear. Our budget process is about as transparent as it gets. You can see what the departments have requested, you can see what we've proposed, and you can see actual expenditures in prior years. So you have a real understanding of what is the change from year to year. You also have a real understanding of what are the additional needs that may be being funded in this recommendation. That budget book also includes an introductory budget letter from myself, series of charts and graphs that we'll share with you here today. It also includes our capital improvement plan, which we just in January finalized, but we will be revisiting that here in this budget process as well. And so those documents can be found online at the county's website. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about that process that got us here, the status of the current economy, the recommendation both operating and capital, the strategic goals. This board has prided themselves on operating under strict strategic goals, and when we recommend funding for initiatives and programs throughout the county, we align those with your strategic plan so we can show that we are a performance-oriented government and that the investments are tied specifically as such. We also talk about our utilities budget, and it should be clear that we operate this as what's called an enterprise fund. We operate it different than the general fund, and we'll talk more about that as we go through. It operates as an independent business, and we'll talk about how we treat it as such. Every budget's not without its challenges, and I promised the departments from day one that while there will be a balanced budget that I bring to you, I will also be honest with you about what we could not achieve and what I'm recommending, and we'll talk a little bit about some of that. And then all of the steps that are still available for public engagement, well above and beyond contacting any of us on staff and yourselves directly. There are a series of meetings that we'll talk about. So this process, and for me, just over 18 months I've had the pleasure to serve as your county administrator. It feels like 18 days. It's been gone very quickly, but in that period of time I've hopefully done as much listening as I do talking. Some people would disagree, but I've had an opportunity to meet with really diverse groups of citizens from all income levels in our community, all backgrounds, and that process is extremely important as we develop the budget recommendations for you. As it was important in your development of your strategic plan, take all of that into consideration as we go into this budget recommendation. The departments started in October submitting their requests for operating consideration. November and December, Barbara and myself and her staff met with all the county departments, all the constitutional officers. We met with the school staff. We also meet with some of our nonprofit providers and contribution requests. We held work sessions as it related to these different departments, and engaging different folks on what their needs. This was majorly part of the capital improvement plan, which you're already familiar with. We also, in 2x2s and 1x1s, always talk to you ongoing about your priorities for the community and try to incorporate those in the recommendation here today. And obviously, we held the public hearing for the 25-year capital improvement plan. It goes without saying, we are a conservative community, a fiscally conservative community, and we pride ourselves on that, and we pride ourselves on our low tax rate. We, under your direction, continue to bring you a budget here that was built on that same framework. When possible, we seek efficiencies and cost savings. I will tell you, we have wound things pretty tight. At this point, we've squeezed for a couple years in a row. It's really tough to start gaining much more efficiencies. That doesn't mean we don't look at systems that make our lives easier, better engagement for our residents, but we are really pushing things at this point, and I think we're operating efficiently today. There was a request to maintain existing service levels, and we've done so in this budget request. And as always, everything we do is based on policy, financial policy and requirements. This budget is also built on all of your existing policies and requirements. So let's talk about some of the good. And with the good, there's challenges, and so I want to balance this a little bit. In the past 5 years, we've seen over $306 million of new capital investment in Goochland County. Last year alone had a record year of $120.5 million. And these are projected building starts based on building permits and those information. But that is substantial growth in our community and probably unprecedented in our history. We continue to have the highest percentage of job growth, percentage-wise, in the Commonwealth. You saw this statistic for the first time last year quantified. This year it grew even above the 37% that you saw last year, and that's based on the State Chamber of Commerce. And so with a high job percent, we also have extremely low unemployment. Our unemployment rate here is 3%, and that compares favorably against the Commonwealth and the Richmond MSA of 3.4 and 3.6. So Goochland, 3% unemployment. It's important to note, while we have good job growth and while we have a very low unemployment statistic, that does not mean all of our residents in our community are employed, or they may be underemployed. And so we take that into consideration as we develop recommendations to you. One of the things from a positive standpoint, our median income at $86,000 is the second highest in the Commonwealth. And that's a great statistic to tout if we're doing economic development and those kinds of things. But we also important to recognize we have residents in our community that are far below that. And so it's a good economic development indicator, but it's also something we have to balance with the reality of some of our residents in our community as well. Median housing, this is sort of the same kind of statistic. As you can see, we're almost $50,000 higher than the next closest jurisdiction on median house value. Those of you that have a home, especially those of you that are looking to sell, that's a great statistic. It also shows where the investments that folks are making in real estate in our community is holding value for Goochland. It is a challenge for residents that if $300,000 is that median income or median house value, for those that can't hit that target, that creates a housing challenge for some of our residents. So it's a good statistic, but there are unmet needs of certain residents. Building permits, just in the past 5 years, have gone up 46%. And that's an indicator of the housing starts that we've had and the new commercial investment. And so that's a real mix, and it's been, this board has been supportive of our building permits department and our community development in general, but that is the kind of shift. And some of that's coming out of the most recent fiscal downturn and Goochland also is clearly a destination, as we've seen with recent requests. So here we go. On the budget that you're seeing this year, our proposed all funds budget is being recommended at just shy of 90 million at 89.4. This is the all funds budget. We will talk about the general fund, but as you can see, the all funds budget is relatively consistent with your priorities as a board. Education being a top priority, human services, public safety are our top priorities as a government. Everything else has really shifted. And I will point the big change from prior year budget, even though there's growth, you'll see down there in the capital funds, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. This year alone, we have some major investments at capitals, which really driving the overall budget increase this year. And that's been planned for, and no debt is being projected for that either. So all of that is intentional and has been considered and planned for. So let's talk about how our primary revenue generator is our real estate tax. We have, as I said earlier, prided ourselves on having one of the lowest tax rates in the region. As you can see here, for those not in the TCSD, our tax rate is far below many of our partners, the comparison jurisdictions in the region. But we're also trying to deliver some services that some folks that are moving in from some of these other jurisdictions, they're expecting similar levels of service at a much lower tax rate. And so we're balancing those kinds of service demands with tax rate, but this is something this board has prided themselves on and has worked to maintain. Now that's real estate tax rate. That does not mean that certain individuals in the community won't see a overall total bill increase because their value of their home has gone up. But from a rate standpoint, we have recommended to leave the rate flat in this budget, so there is no tax increase being proposed to this board and this community for real estate tax rates. We're recommending to hold it steady. As you can see, really almost 20 cents lower than our next, Louisa, our next closest comparison jurisdiction. So the general fund revenue, you can see, again, here's a better example than what I showed you earlier. Real property taxes makes up the majority of our revenues. We have seen very strong growth in our personal property this year, and that is allowing us to tackle some of the challenges that we have from a resource standpoint. Not much other growth throughout here. You will see some fund balance transfer primarily in the capital area, planned again, that we plan to address those kinds of areas. But really this is a clear demonstration of where we're really putting our money where our priorities are. From a capital improvement plan standpoint, and again, we changed from a 5-year capital improvement plan to a 25-year capital improvement plan. So I don't want the $516 million number to scare anyone off. That number is what we believe is the result of prudent long-term planning. As you can see, the majority of those funds are going into some of our other priority areas. Transportation, we have ended up with state declines, and this is one of our ongoing challenges of having to step up and meet more of the long-term transportation needs. Education, you're very aware that the long-term capital improvement plan calls for more investments in public schools and replacement facilities. That's accounted for here. Fire and rescue, we've tackled a number of the gaps in services, and in our capital improvement plan accounts for all of those. You will see some smaller amounts in sheriffs and parks and rec and facilities. Judicial administration, even though we have one large project plan there, when you look in the context of 516 million, it's showing up about 5%. That's the courthouse replacement project we have. We'll get into more detail on some of that as we go through here, and then you can see it really by function here, broken down for you. That 10.2 is our annual increase this year in capital improvement. One major project drives that, which is the Fairgrounds Road extension. That's 3.9 million alone. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through here and identify those projects. So consistent with your strategic goals is project 1's the Fairground Road extension and 522 intersection improvements. Just to be clear, the project that we're funding in here is specifically the extension from the stub of the roundabout down to Route 6. And that's 3.9. As you recall, we were planning to locally fund about 50% of that project, and we've applied for revenue sharing to hopefully offset that with another 50%. In our space planning this year, we were very deliberate about looking at what are the long-term service needs of the departments to provide the levels of customer service we hope for our residents. And we identified a number of deficiencies, short and long-term, in space needs for how we're serving the public. Administration complex renovations, specifically in the upcoming budget, are targeted at first floor renovations here, specifically to address deficiencies in the Commissioner of Revenues and our treasurer's offices. We will also make investments in the extension building to address some of the registrar's shortcomings on space. And so throughout our capital improvement plan, we have planned investments of renovations. And in fact, there's one that we hope to yet do before the end of this fiscal year that we'll be bringing to you next month. But we have to, there's a timing with all those renovations, and you'll have those come to you in due course. One of the other areas that you'll see, and we'll get into this more in detail, and I should have pointed out probably earlier, everything I'm talking about here, again, this is basically the summary of what you're going to have meeting after meeting of in-depth review beyond this. And we'll talk more about those meetings, but you're going to hear all of this again in much more detail. But one of the areas we are recommending is a decrease in the deferral of a public hearing fee. And sometimes there is legitimate reasons why it makes sense to defer public hearing, and we've charged the same fee. We're recommending a proposal that makes a case that's not quite ready for prime time. If the developer wants to, they wouldn't have to pay a full ride to defer that case, and you'll hear more of that in the proposal. I can't stress enough, especially with all the development pressures that we are continuing to see here in Goochland, that this board has continued to prioritize maintaining our rural character as a community. Your comprehensive plan has identified maintaining about 85% of the county as rural land. That does not mean there won't be certain types of approved development there, but primarily it does not allow what we allow in the other 15%, which is a little higher densities. We're really targeting there because that's where we've made our investments in our utilities. And so really trying to maintain the Goochland that many people move or have lived here for generations and have valued much in the same way for years to come. This board has continued to support our land use program, and we, as you're fully aware, we've changed the requirements of this program for annual review to make sure that all the participants in the program are legitimate participants. And as our assessor's office and Marianne and her team have done a great job with this, it really results in about a $3.1 million benefit to the residents that participate in that program of what they're paying in reduced taxes. So should we have charged the full freight, we would have had another 3.1. But because we value the rural character of our community, we've supported this program and believe in it. And it does benefit those residents who participate and meet those requirements. We're also making planned investments for areas, so we are not deferring maintenance in this plan. To the extent that revenues have permitted, we're making necessary HVAC replacements, planned improvements to the Hidden Rock fields. They have not been overhauled in many years, and we have planned that. That was in your prior capital improvement plan that continues to roll itself through. Schools, and Dr. Raley will be following me here today, so you'll hear much more about the schools investments, but there's $1.9 million in capital improvement in our public schools next year. And then the 3.9 again is that Fairgrounds Road extended project that I had mentioned earlier. To do everything else we're talking about here today, we have to have strong financial management, and that is a core foundation of every decision we make. And we're certainly proud of the bond rating that we've achieved and look forward to maintaining that and maybe even expanding those horizons. We'll see. We continue to maintain unassigned fund balance. This is something that we have been extremely proud of that we've been able to. It's also something that our rating agencies have prided their decisions on in the past, and we continue to support that. One of the largest projects, while not necessarily being funded in your budget request this year, you've funded it in prior years, is updating our core financial management system. It's been almost 30 years since we've had a new financial system for the county. That project is going to touch every department in some way over the next 2 years, and will really drive the business of the county for many years to come. Continuing with our policies, even with the capital improvement plan, and we've shared all along that the 25-year plan, only the first 5 years are what we are calling balanced. And we balance that within the current tax rate And what goes into that? We have to look at what debt will come on, what debt would come off. We look at our ability to pay. There's a difference between debt service capacity and just the debt service. So what you're seeing right here is in relationship to our policy, we're still, even with the plan we're bringing to you, is far below your policy. The ability to pay is something different. As you go to add to that, you actually have to have on hand cash. We have made an additional $100,000 contribution to our debt service fund to be able to pay future debt, and we have planned that in upcoming years to handle what was planned in the next 5 years. So let's talk about, and strategic goal 4 is comprehensive for us because it really gets to the heart of the services that we have prioritized as a community. Public education being amongst the top. We believe with our partnership with our schools that good schools make a good Goochland, and a good Goochland hopefully supports our schools. And so we see this as a team effort. And we have recommended in this budget an increase of $760,000, just above our projection for last year, about 3.5% funding increase. With the state contribution to their budget, the schools will see just over a $961,000 increase in their operating budget for next year, in total a 3.3% increase over prior year. The capital improvement plan for schools includes major new school facilities. In the 5-year plan, it's specifically Goochland Elementary is planned, as well as some improvements at the high school, middle school complex, and other major renovations. One of the classrooms is planned to be renovated there. But the schools, like the county, are also making investments in their ongoing operations and maintenance and not kicking that can down the road or deferring. They're tackling projects as necessary and making sure that they can continue to operate their facilities like we have for many years to come, as long as we're doing those major upgrades as necessary. So the school CIP, as I mentioned earlier, is about $1.9 million, and that also includes some ongoing roof improvements, HVAC, and bus replacements. Public safety. As important is a safe community, and our partners with the Sheriff's Department, Fire and Rescue, and Animal Protection go above and beyond each and every day for our community. And it's important that we recognize their needs and realities as well. This budget recommends an additional 5.7% funding increase for the collective public safety entities that I had mentioned earlier. In the capital improvement plan, in the 25-year plans is $127.2 million of additional capital investment. We're going to talk a little bit more as I go into each of these categories for you, what those kinds of investments are. Starting with the Sheriff's Office. This board saw fit mid-year this year to increase the Sheriff's Office emergency medical dispatchers by 3 different additional positions. They've begun the recruitment of that. Hopefully have some good candidates in the works and get those onboarded. I know they're doing research right now for the appropriate system and what works well for Goochland. And in the year to come, we're going to have that service available for our residents. And this budget includes a full year of funding for those particular positions. We continue to plan for Sheriff's Department vehicle replacements. The Sheriff's Department has many miles to travel every day. They run a very good and solid maintenance program and extend the life of their vehicles as much as possible, but maintaining an annual replacement program is critical to sustaining a successful operation for the Sheriff's Department. This budget continues to recommend funding that and associated training for personnel. Looking at Fire and Rescue. Fire and Rescue is seeing approximately a 10.7% increase. I will tell you, and it's important to denote, both the Sheriff's Department and Fire and Rescue, I was not able to fully recommend their request. There is believed to be additional demand on the Sheriff's side for the deputies, and on the Fire and Rescue side, as we have seen the unfortunate reduction in our volunteer force, it has shifted us towards more career staffing. While this plan does include a recommendation for 5 additional firefighters, it is not what was requested, and the demand is going to continue to be on us as a jurisdiction to support their needs as well. It does include some ongoing equipment replacement, their SCBA units with breathing apparatus, hydraulic tool replacements, new ambulance, and this year we are actually beginning to set aside for a West Creek Fire Station in the amount of $500,000. What's not on this slide, but equally as important, is that we call attention to two other efforts that we have funded and recommended in this budget. Our community currently has a deficiency of not having a fire station in District 2. This budget includes funding to acquire a future fire station site in District 2. And we are also recommending in this budget funds for a replacement Company 2 station for land to be acquired for future new construction. So those two facilities, there's funds in this budget to acquire land for future buildings in this recommendation. Overall, with all the fire stations, and we have, and it's important to note, that we are not recommending what we would call basically blips or peaks in this budget. We have spread the replacement of equipment throughout, not just fire and rescue, to the point where we have more, to the extent that we could, levelized funding. So and also not trying to pick up everything all in one year so it all expires in another year. In this budget, it was very intentional throughout all departments, fire and rescue being similar, that we were looking to replace on cycles, not all at once kinds of approach. And I have to say that's consistent. We worked through with our school partners, they did the same. We worked through all the departments and they did the same. One of the areas that we're extremely excited about, as you drive down Fairgrounds Road every day, you see a little more dirt being piled. There is a lot of work going on in the new animal shelter. The rains haven't helped, but it's moving along. We do anticipate in the next fiscal year opening the new animal shelter. With that, and just to give you some perspective, the new animal shelter is approximately 10 times the size of the current animal shelter. Right now, your animal shelter operates daily, or the hours of operation, with just 2 part-time personnel. And so we have to take that into consideration as we look at the new world of our operating of our shelter. Since even before I got here, there was a shortage of animal protection officers. Taking all into consideration, there is a recommendation for an animal protection officer, and taking a part-time and 2 part-time attendants to full-time in this recommendation. You'll see we're also recommending to cover the operational expenses of the new shelter as well. The new shelter will have public water and sewer that we have to take care of, and you have to heat and provide electric to quite a bit more. So we've prepared that, and that's been in our plans as well. The other areas that we are seeing demands in, and our health and human services continue to grow. And while some of that is revenue offset with social services and state and federal funds, the demand is still clear that there is certain residents in our community that still have a demand for these services. And so we are seeing that area. We had requests from contributions for more funds. We've had requests from the nonprofit agencies that we partner for more funds. The demand continues to grow. So while we have some good positive economic indicators, there's still folks in our community that need these supportive services, and we are seeing growth in that area. And last but not least is the folks that try to keep the engine running every day and provide the highest quality customer service we can to our residents. This recommendation on the county side includes countywide includes no employee health care cost increase. We're recommending a 2% merit increase for the county employees. That's consistent with what we're seeing in the region from our competitive jurisdictions and what they're doing for their employees. You'll hear from Dr. Raley some more about what the schools are doing on their compensation side here. And year 2 of our benchmark program funding is being recommended for here as well. This next chart, I'm going to touch on some that I may have missed. So the dispatchers and firefighters and animal protection positions I shared with you earlier on this chart, but there are also 3 other positions I want to call your attention to. 1 and 2 of them are what we call revenue offsets. So the programs that they administer or run actually come with revenue to help offset the cost of those operations. The first is the rec coordinator. One of the things that we're extremely proud of, next board meeting in March, you're going to dedicate Central High Cultural Arts Center. And we're planning to fully program out of that center, just as the business plan this board adopted called for. And we plan revenue from programming there and elsewhere to offset this rec coordinator position. The Commissioner on Revenue, one of the things that we've seen that's driving our budget from a revenue standpoint is the personal property. They've seen an amazing amount of additional personal property work, and most of which is offset with state DMV funds. And so those two positions, and that one's actually a part-time, existing part-time position going to full-time. The last position that I have proposed for you is the HR specialist. We currently have that position at part-time, and recommending that position to become a full-time position. So most of the recommendations from a staffing standpoint are in our public safety arenas. There are a couple other areas, just those three positions I mentioned there, that are outside. So we're not really, one of the questions I always get are, are you growing the size of government? And the answer is yes, but we're growing it intentionally to provide the level of services we want to provide for our residents, especially in public safety. That's where the primary staffing increase is today. When I'm standing in front of you next year, that's where the primary staffing increases will be again, because we continue to have needs and demands in our public safety areas. When we look at other general governance kind of funding, we always look for revenue offsets when they're available, but we try to limit the growth in general government administration to every extent possible. So let me shift gears on you for a little bit. Utilities. I mentioned earlier in my introduction, we operate the utilities as an enterprise fund. And what this basically means is the users of the system cover through their rates and fees the operations of that system. Now, I think it's fair to say at one time the general fund did provide a loan to the utility system. Between this year and next year, that loan will be paid back to the general fund, and the utility system will be 100% independent of any contribution from the general fund. That's been planned, that's been intentional, but we've done a lot of things in the utility system to stabilize it, but plan for the future. You'll see their operating budget's 5.5 and capital 2.4. One thing that I really want to call your attention to, this past year really was a bellwether year for us to get our arms around, and the capital improvement plan project sort of spearheaded this, but also in conjunction with a utility rate study. It's hard to believe, but some of those pipes in the ground are already 15 years old and are going to be requiring maintenance and upgrade. We have our utility master plan called for water flow improvements, that would help with both some of the stale water issues we've heard over the years. It would help us with our flow capacity. We have connections that in the TCSD that have not come to fruition, and we're working with some residents to do some expansions in those areas. But in order to do that, and I think it's important to call this, that make sure that we, and as you know, we also get rate increases passed along to us from our partners at Henrico. As their rates go up, we have to factor that into our rates. So there's a number of reasons why the next item I'm sharing with you is important for you to consider. We are recommending a 5% water rate increase and a 6% sewer rate increase. This is planned so we can take care of these improvements and make sure the system's always operating. We don't want to kick the can down the road. Some jurisdictions say, well, we'll make that a 2% rate, or we'll make it a 3% rate. What you're ultimately doing is kicking the can down the road because you're not staying true with the maintenance of your system. Some of the challenges we face, and it's just our reality, we have a lower customer base here right now today that we spread this burden on. As we get new customers, that helps share those costs and those kinds of things, but we don't see that overnight. It takes a while for that to matriculate into the process, but in order to make sure we're maintaining the system, providing the daily operational improvements, meeting our obligations to our who we purchase product from, these are the rates that we're recommending, and that we will continue to recommend rate increases consistent with those expenditures to make sure that we're operating a highly safe and efficient system for our residents and can handle the demands that are placed on us. We are currently way under capacity from what we have the ability to serve, and some would say that's okay, because that means if we're using more, we got a lot more folks on our system. But in the right areas, at the right places, that will help us look at that over time. But as of right now, with the current projections of growth, these are the rates that we have to recommend to you. You're going to hear much more of that as we get into the utilities presentations in the weeks to come. TCSD ad valorem, it's important to recognize that this rate is also being recommended to you at flat. So overall, there is no tax increase, rate increase being recommended to this board. The TCSD, for those that are less familiar with it, and if you're not in the TCSD, you're only paying the 52 cents. So this is probably for those that actually pay the additional ad valorem tax of 32 cents. We have a debt obligation that covers all the infrastructure that's in that utility system, primarily it's on our eastern border, really from Route 6 all the way up to the Hanover line. There's pipes in the ground. We made major investments to it. This board, in your wisdom, several years back, did a refinancing to try to level out the obligation of this system, and that's working effectively. At this point, we believe, as long as growth maintains consistent at current path, that we'll be able to maintain that rate flat. That was not the case prior to that refunding. And it should also be important to note that the ad valorem revenue itself does not cover this debt obligation. So 55%, and primarily I'm talking about commercial with one exception of Kenlock, 55% of the increase in value from when the TCSD was started, those revenues also get contributed to pay down the debt service for this. And as you can see, this line, the gray line, is really what our debt service payments are projected to be. They really peak out there in year 2027. But a combination of the two revenues I just reviewed has us, in our belief, maintaining this revenue, this rate flat over that period of time. We also have very strong reserves in the TCSD to also prepare for downturns and those kinds of things. And as new growth comes in the proper areas and joining the system and paying that ad valorem, we look at this annually. If there was a way to reduce it, trust me, I'd be recommending you to reduce it today. But we also need to make sure we're not only fiscally prudent for the rate we recommend today, but also making sure that we're not pushing any problems to folks in the near future. So this is the reality for those that are in the TCSD for combined tax rate. You can see if you're in the TCSD, you're actually paying that 85, and you can see how that really stacks up to some of the other comparison jurisdictions that we do. We still weigh fairly favorably in the region in a combined tax rate, but this is something that we do have to take serious as we look at not only our general property tax rate increase and or the TCSD rate. As you increase that, there is a business competitiveness factor that we have to consider, and that's why we show this combined rate, so we look at ourselves in comparison. All right, I shared with you a lot of information. You're going to hear a lot more detail as we move forward, but again, I'd be remiss if I didn't share with you some of the challenges. Funding for road improvements is going to continue to be a challenge for us. The available funds for everybody in the region is diminishing. There's more need than there's funds. In fact, most of the funds available, if they just took care of the maintenance that was needed, we wouldn't be able to do much more road work. And so that is going to be a challenge for all localities. Public safety. I can't stress to you that the sheriff on numerous occasions has expressed to me his needs for additional deputies. I'm sure you're going to hear that again here today. The fire and rescue system continues to see more and more demands being placed on the career staff and needs for you to fund those career staff. We continue to try to make sure that we have a competitively paid workforce and so we're actually have the ability to compete and keep good talent. Public education. We all know that we have a composite index here that requires us to pay more than what I would say our fair share is. Just having the ability to serve The average cost is 10, 11 grand just to cover a student. So just using the 10 grand number, we have to cover 8,000 of the 10 for an educational experience. Our neighbors in Hanover cover just 50% of that cost. And so the composite index and how the state gives us funding, that goes back to that median income. In some ways, it does us no favors to have that number other than a good economic indicator for those of means. It does hurt us on the school funding side. And as a locality, we have to pick up more and more of those funds, and the state continues they pay homage to education. I'm not sure that they're trickling down to the localities the way that we would all prefer. Last but not least, I started with, we have to recognize we have a community of folks from all levels of means. And that is extremely important as we look at each of these pressures of service demands, and we look at the financial burden we shift to those residents. And that is a challenge. We will never be able to fully fund all of the requests, but we tried, in the recommendation to you here today, prioritize the requests as such and balance. So today, not only do you get to hear from myself, Dr. Raley will come up next, Sheriff Agnew will follow, Chief McKay and Tim Cuff will close us out here today. Barbara's going to come up at the end of all of them and talk to you about what actions do we need as it relates to authorizing tax rates and going through that whole procedure. On February 27th in this room, it is a change from what we've done in the past. We used to have work sessions. Every board staff budget meeting will be in this room and will be televised and recorded. And so on February 27th, we will get into the revenues in much more detail, our debt policies, and showing how the plans that we have in front of you are consistent with those debt policies. We will revisit the CIP again, partly because in the budget we adopt the annual budget for the CIP and then we adopt the plan. I will tell you at this point there have been no proposed changes to what you recently adopted, but we will revisit that. Public utilities, you'll get much more opportunity to have some quality time with Mr. Kilduff and Matthew. Kelly will be here to discuss HR and more in depth of the positions and funding recommendations. And judicial administration is one of those categories where we rate it under financial, but that's all of sort of the court, circuit court clerk, general district court, those kinds of functions. On March 6th, we'll get into more of the health areas, and that also includes our contribution, general administration, that's my office, county attorneys, finance, community development, and finally general services that day. If we need it, we have also blocked an additional work session on March 13th. Last year we didn't. That doesn't mean we won't this year, so we planned it appropriately. As important to these work sessions, if not even more, are the town hall meetings. I think folks know we get a different level of dialogue when we go to the town hall meetings than we do even in work sessions and or public hearings. And I know last year I found specifically during budget time, the town hall meetings extremely valuable to the budget process. And being able to hear from our residents about their concerns of what was funded, what was not funded. And so that process and all those are listed here. On April 3rd, and you'll hear this more detail at the end today, will be the public hearings with a proposed budget adoption of April 17th, just in time to be ready to do the spring tax. So let's just be clear, this budget does not increase the property tax rate, doesn't increase the TCSD tax rate. We've funded our priorities consistent with your strategic plan of public safety education employees to the best of our ability, and it is grounded in the feedback that we receive from our residents every day. Mr. Chairman, with that, I will stand to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Mr. Badesky. Board members, do we have any questions for the county administrator at this time?
Not at this time.
Good presentation.
It was an excellent presentation. Thank you very much. And again, we're very early in the process, but this is very helpful information.
Thank you.
And I'm sure the citizens appreciate all the transparency measures that we're taking to go through this process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda would be the Goodson Public Schools. guess Ms. White will walk us through with Dr. Rayleigh.
Dr. Rayleigh.
Dr. Rayleigh will walk us through.
We've practiced to make sure that everything works okay, so we keep our fingers crossed.
Well, technology makes our lives faster, easier, and cheaper, so more convenient.
Well, while Debbie's getting set, I want to take this opportunity to thank you for the chance to share the school board's approved budget with you this evening. As Mr. Podesky referenced on the county side, a lot of work has gone in to make this possible this evening, and Debbie's done a fantastic job, but it's been a collaboration with our principals, our department heads. We've gone through a transparent process like you have to get to this point in time. We've conducted a community survey, we've had public hearings, we have had public work sessions as well, and the school board really deliberated long and hard on what you're going to see this evening. They really asked some critical questions, thought critically about what we need in order to accomplish our ongoing mission and vision for our school division. And so I'm proud today to be able to present you a balanced, needs-based budget that poises our school division for continued success. I want to spend some time today recognizing some of the celebrations of our school division and honoring the successes that you have played a role in collaboration with the school board. You have been in your seats for several years now. In this community, our school division has transformed as a result of your support and as a result of leadership that you have provided for our community. I want to celebrate some of that this evening. So our goal is to talk a little bit about budget philosophy, celebrate some of our successes, and then get into the nitty-gritty of our requests to you for your consideration outlined in specific goal areas, and then talk about our recommendations for funding, and then have an opportunity for dialogue at the end. But we don't talk very often about our strategic plan, and Mr. Podesky has outlined his budget in alignment with your strategic plan, and ours is the same. And so when you build culture within an organization, it's important that everybody understands what the vision, the mission, and the values of an organization are, and these are non-negotiable for us. These have driven the work that we have done, and you will see that this presentation is aligned with these core principles in our school divisions working that we do every day. So nothing in this budget is outside of the realm of what we have identified in our core strategic plan. And so when you build a budget, it does no good to have all these different puzzle pieces out here and all over the place. So this budget really brings everything together and aligns our financial resources and our request to you this afternoon with our instructional goals and our business operation goals. So everything is in alignment and creates the financial resources that we need in order to be successful well into the future. But at the end of the day, this is what it's really all about, right? Our students, those 2,500 students that walk through our door every day, board our school buses, enter our clinics, and the students that we serve. And we have built a budget where it is built on the best interest of our students and providing the resources that we need in order to continue our success, but make sure that we're providing an exceptional experience for these students. So in 2011, you were elected, and you had made a lot of changes for our community for the better. You've worked very closely in collaboration with the school board to make our school division more successful and to provide the resources that we have received in order for us to be a shining star, not only in the Commonwealth, but across the region as well. And so just for a few minutes, I want to provide you with a glimpse on what you have been able to accomplish with.
In this video, you'll learn more about what it feels like to be a learner in Goochland County, Virginia. What was your school experience like? Did you have to take standards of learning tests at the end of a course? Did you listen to your phone on your trip to school on a bus? Did you carry a computer with you in your book bag? And did you learn math from a penguin? Most of our students in Goochland ride to school, many on our buses that travel many miles each day, between getting students to school, shuttling students to a different campus, and getting them home. For some students, the ride is short, but for some, the ride may be upwards of 50 minutes. Students arrive to school, and many come carrying a computing device. This year, we've expanded our iPad take-home program in grades 3 through 8 to include one-to-one iPads in K through 2 and take-home MacBook Air laptops at the high school. Our focus around this initiative is deeper learning, one of our major areas included in our strategic plan. Deeper learning is an educational philosophy of offering students learning experiences that include voice and choice, application to real-world applications and skills, and opportunities to develop knowledge at higher cognitive levels. Important toward deeper learning, too, is the idea of a growth mindset, that all students can learn and all students grow from making mistakes. The one-to-one program equips students with the latest generations of hardware and software to put important skills such as communication, collaboration, and creativity together in projects and lessons. Students are not only gaining skills in technology, but they're also learning how to use these tools to further their understanding of core subjects, the arts, and in career and technical education. One of the successful approaches we've used in elementary school to support STEM learning is called children's engineering. Students work out problems like an engineer by analyzing the problem, proposing solutions, and testing their approach. Many times students find these problems both fun and challenging. Students also enjoy hands-on learning through a diverse set of courses in our career and technical education program. Multiple career clusters are represented, and new additions to our program have included a greenhouse, the use of drones, and beginning in middle school, students can develop a number of skills, some high-tech and some low. Middle school is a great time to figure out what you'd like to do and study later in high school. Our middle school was named recently as one of a number of schools to watch, a national program that recognizes high-quality middle school programs. In addition, our middle school and all 3 elementary schools were named as Apple Distinguished Schools. Students grades 3 through high school use Schoology. Schoology is called a learning management solution and is both a web-based and app-based application that virtualizes a student's day. Students use Schoology to access class materials, turn in assignments, and take assessments. Teachers can use Schoology to communicate with their parents. They also use this tool to support a student's learning and can individualize learning for students based upon their needs. At Goochland High School, students have a great range of learning opportunities, many at different academic levels. Over 20 advanced placement courses are available in addition to virtual courses. Some GHS students apply to specialty programs such as Maggie Walker Governor's School in Richmond and the Blue Ridge Virtual Governor's School, and our Advanced College Academy, a partnership with Reynolds Community College. High school is also the opportunity to hone workplace skills. Our CTE program has expanded over the last 5 years, introducing a number of new courses and expanding the career clusters available to students. Students in our CTE program can take courses on heavy equipment operation, nursing, CAD and engineering, construction, agriculture, computer science, and video production. A new apprenticeship program offers on-the-job training for students while they get paid. Students in Goochland also have the opportunity to develop skills and competencies in the fine arts, in world languages, and senior study a topic of interest to them that combines volunteer hours in our long-standing senior project. And we can't finish before mentioning Goochland's champion-producing tradition in athletics.
There's a cool shot here at the end, but that video was shot during the course of a week in our school division. It wasn't staged. It's what we do every day. And you have played a significant role in that. And we would not have been able to accomplish that without the support that you have provided in collaboration and in partnership with our school board. So we thank you. We thank you for what you've done. And as we look forward to our FY19 spending plan, we want to be able to do that and also work towards continuous improvement. And so the budget that the school board has approved for your consideration allows us to do that, to honor our past successes, but to also to take it to the next level and to allow us to continue to shine and be a leader in the Commonwealth and across the region. So some other accomplishments, and Dr. Hendren mentioned that in the video, but if you think about all the schools, private and public, worldwide, there are less than 200 schools worldwide that have received the acclaim as being an Apple Distinguished School. We had 4 schools eligible, and every one of our schools that was eligible received accolades as being an Apple Distinguished School. And I expect that when the high school becomes eligible, we'll be 5 for 5. So a significant accomplishment, and one that was supported through you, and we have every student, grades K through 12, has their own device at this point in time, and it's allowing us to accomplish our deeper learning initiative. Our teachers and our staff, our administrators are recognized nationally for the great work that we're doing. We've been invited to go to Cupertino, California to present on the work that we're doing with our Apple Distinguished Schools program and our deeper learning initiative. Our special education department is ranked as one of the top 10 special education departments in the Commonwealth. And you know the great work of our finance department and how we are really striving every day to be great stewards of our taxpayers' dollars. Our budget document is recognized as a leader and is used as a model in many school divisions. Debbie has received certification as being one of only 4 in the Commonwealth that has received a school finance and operators certificate. So fiscally, instructionally, operationally, we're operating a very strong and successful school division, and we certainly want to be able to continue that. We tout the successes of our academic program and being recognized as only one of 7.6% of the school divisions statewide that have had all of our schools fully accredited since the implementation of the testing program. And our literacy scores are in line at an elementary level with what we would find statewide. But much like Alabama is a perennial powerhouse that is competing for the national championship every year, we are a top 25 school division year in and year out that is always recognized as a leader with the 5th best history SOL scores in the Commonwealth and ranking high in multiple measures in many different ways. Our on-time graduation rate is strong, exceeding the state average, and we continue to strive and meet the needs of every student that walks into our schools. So again, a snippet into a day in the life of our school division, and again, opportunities for us to continue to strive for these successes and recognize the great things that we're doing as a school division. But we're also more than just numbers on a page too, and you saw some of that in the presentation. You know, we are providing really well-rounded opportunities for kids in the fine arts with some things that we're doing to provide an interdisciplinary approach in our classrooms. We have 2 humanities classes where we are teaching English and world history at the same time, and students are getting 2 credits by going to 1 class. So rather than learning English in this class and world history in this class, we're combining them together for an interdisciplinary approach where you're using your writing skills and your research skills together, which makes a heck of a lot of sense because we don't live in isolation in our world. So proud of what we're doing there. Technology is a part of our DNA. It's what we're doing, and it's really been used well to provide a deeper learning experience for our students, and we're using it in multiple ways with preschool kids and our high school kids as well. And we're very proud, as you know, with what we're doing for our career and technical education program and preparing our students to be career ready by the time that they leave our high school. So yes, we want to look in the rearview mirror and recognize what we've been done, but not ever be satisfied. We want to continually challenge the status quo, look forward to what we can do into the future to continue our success long term. And so this budget allows us to do that. It is a needs-based budget. There are multiple things, as you know, in every budget that just don't make it to the level of priority. There are things that are important, certainly, but we need to make very, very tough strategic decisions, and this budget reflects that. Truly a needs-based budget for your consideration. So let's talk about those a little bit as outlined by our goal areas, and the first one is improving learning outcomes and preparing our students for life through deeper learning. And with your blessing, we used turnback funds this year to be able to add an additional kindergarten teacher at Byrd Elementary School. So that was a short-term fix for us. We had class sizes that were increasing beyond the levels that we were satisfied with, so we used turnback funds to do that, but this budget takes that position and funds it operationally, where we can maintain those class sizes at traditional levels. Without this position, that class size would go to 21.3. And then included in this request also is operating funds for us to be able to add a trailer to Byrd Elementary School and lease a trailer, as well as a request that you have what you will consider at your next meeting for using proper funds for the installation of that trailer, and that cost being at $50,000. So that was an approval last week by the school board for your consideration. We are proud of what we're doing at the high school, but we're seeing class sizes start to raise to a place where we are not happy, and it's impacting the ability for us to be able to provide the programs that we want. So this budget includes the addition of one science teacher at the high school, which will allow us to reduce class sizes, add some more programs specifically at the AP level in biology and chemistry, and allow us to expand our physics program a little bit as well. In addition to that, the budget includes one FTE for our science program at the middle school. We have, again, larger class sizes in the 6th grade level than we want, and so this position would allow us to reduce those class sizes, allow us to offer some more electives, thus freeing up some offerings that we were able to do in our career and technical education program at the middle school. Ongoing professional development is important for us. If we want to be able to keep our talented teachers, we must have them engaged, and we must be able to keep them trained so that they can do exceptional work in the classroom. So we surveyed our teachers at the beginning of the year and said, what do you need from a professional development program? And they said, I need someone who's going to be working side by side with me in my classroom to help me hone my craft. I need someone who's going to provide me job-embedded support. So we are strategically abandoning some of the positions that we have at this point in time in our current budget, recreating those positions so that we can provide support from a literacy standpoint and support from a mathematics standpoint, so we can provide a guide by the side for teachers. Teachers oftentimes want to do some amazing things in their classroom, but they don't have that support to get them to that next level. This is going to be a colleague and a peer that's going to work side by side with them in the classroom and say, you want to do more performance-based assessments, here's what I can do to support you and help you do that. So we think this is really going to accelerate the growth within our classrooms and allow us to take our instructional program to the next level. We have some federal funds that we're able to use in order to provide some outreach to our students in the BIRD community. What we find is if we can provide some early intervention to students and get into the home and start to teach parents how to provide some early literacy support for their kids, by the time they get to kindergarten, we have helped to close the gap somewhat. So using some federal Title I funds, we are recommending that we hire a part-time home literacy liaison so that we can get into the homes, teach parents some skills that will ultimately help the literacy program that we have in our early grades. The budget also includes some support for our gifted students and an increase in tuition at the Maggie Walker Governor School that we need to accommodate for. Also transfers some money from our operational budget into a special budget category for what we want to do for our ACA tuition, ultimately increasing that cost slightly from $25 to $30 so that we can maintain the sustainability of that program. One thing that's important to me, and Mr. Badesky mentioned that somewhat in his budget presentation, is although there is a significant amount of wealth in our community, we also have families where it is difficult for them to be able to meet the needs of their family and the things that they experience in their own lives. And we charge our families some fees. And as soon as you walk in the door to come to kindergarten, the first thing we charge you is a $10 instructional fee that goes to pay for resources. Well, we have families that it's difficult to pay that fee. And as this is a public school division, what it takes to operate that school division should be coming from the community and the work that you do to provide the resources for that. So proposing to eliminate some fees, instructional fees, reducing what we are charging for iPad insurance and what we're charging for some laptop insurance. Students who participate in band are charged a fee. Students who participate in dance are charged a fee. So there are significant fees that we charge in some ways. This budget does not include the elimination of all of those fees. It includes some strategic elimination, and hopefully in time we can eliminate more and more and more, but ultimately reducing the burden that some of our families are experiencing and providing the resources in the classroom and paying for that through the division funds. Some other things that we want to provide in this budget are support for our athletic programs, doing some things to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our students in our extracurricular activities, so $16,000 for that. And then we're in the process of really looking at our literacy program and providing the resources that we need in the classroom for individualized leveled reading books. So this budget includes the funds to be able to complete the 3rd year of a 3-year program to do that, and using textbook resources rather than our operational funds to make that happen. From a technology standpoint, we have a textbook budget. You're aware of that sits outside of our operating budget. So rather than using our operating funds to be able to provide some of these software resources, using textbook funds to be able to make that happen, and funding them in a different expenditure stream rather than what we've been funding them in the past. So in summary, this is a lot of things, a lot of detail. I've really worked hard to hit the highlights, but this summary slide includes some of those FTE increases that I've referenced. It itemizes all of those under Goal 1 to the tune of slightly under $550,000 in new expenses in that goal category, all related to instruction. You do see $40,000 requested for the junior ROTC program at Goochland High School. We continue to advocate for that at the federal level, and reached out just as recent as yesterday to our federal legislators, letting them know this is still important to us, but this does include the continuation of that program included in the figures that you see in front of you today. So all those accolades that we received, all the successes of our school division with your support and collaboration with the school board, you know, it doesn't happen without the awesome people that we have working for our school division. Just like you, it takes our people to help us be successful. Whether you're a custodian or an administrator or a teacher or working as a CTE teacher or a bus driver, you know, we are successful because of our people. And so it's important for us as we go forward that we provide a total compensation program that is market competitive, a total compensation that recognizes the contribution of our talented employees, allows us to attract talented employees, retain those that are doing the great work for us as we continue to strive for success. So the budget includes a 2% salary increase for our teachers, which is equal to a step on our salary scale, plus a cost of living adjustment, ultimately equaling 2%. Working to revise our classified salary scales, which were not market competitive, and as we transition from one salary scale to the next, fixing the structure of that scale so that nobody gets less than 2% as we transition, and then a 2% raise for other employment groups. And just like Mr. Badesky's presentation, the budget includes maintaining competitive health insurance and the school division picking up the cost of that health insurance so that our employees benefit from the full 2% salary increase, that their health insurance costs are not taken into their salary. So we're in the second year of a 3-year process to make that happen, and the school board is committed to ongoing discussions about how we can continually modify our salary scales to be competitive, yet at the same time reward those who are doing exceptional work for our school division. So this is a summary slide of where we are in our market. Right now we're ranked 3rd in our market in many ways. We compare ourselves to other school divisions around us, and we've made a lot of progress with your support here. So we want to make sure that the salary scale that we're going to fund for next year maintains our competitiveness, that we don't lose any ground here, and we believe certainly that that will allow us to do that. And fixing the salary scale for our classified employees where we're not competitive, there's lots of red there, as you can see, which means we needed to make some adjustments in those salary scales, and those that are highlighted in red have been the ones that we are recommending for adjustment. And just for comparison purposes, I know you compare yourselves to other counties around you, and we do the same, and most school divisions around us are recommending at this point in time a 2% salary increase, which is in line with inflation, as you can see there at the bottom of the graph. The school division is going to maintain a pot of money for strategic compensation and reward exemplary employees with strategic compensation pay at the end of the year. This has gotten a lot of discussion in our school division, and the school board has really focused hard on what we can do to make sure that we are recognizing exemplary employees and recognizing those that are doing exceptional work for our school division. But the current budget now and the future budget next year includes $80,000 in money for strategic compensation, recognizing our exemplary employees. So this is a snippet of what our health insurance program would look like next year, and you can see in the bottom right-hand corner that we're keeping our employees whole, and actually if you choose to go to the high deductible plan, you can save a little bit of money in your monthly premium, so it incentivizes in some way those individuals to move to the high deductible plan. In addition to teacher pay and other full-time employees, we looked hard at our substitute teacher rates, and we're not competitive here as well, and so the budget includes some money for us to become more competitive. These are the medians in our market, and so the budget includes moving our substitute teacher rates up to at least the median and slightly above at the degree teacher rate, just a few dollars above the median at the degree rate. Certainly there's a significant differential between where we are now with our long-term substitute teachers and the regional median $40 difference. We could not close that gap in one step, but this recommendation gets us closer to that at $165, and then ultimately maintaining a commitment to getting us to the median in future years. We don't oftentimes think of tuition reimbursement as an employee compensation benefit, but it certainly is. We have a lot of employees that we support as we want to build our own internal capacity and support their professional development. We have been underfunding that in the past, so this budget includes $19,000 in additional funds for tuition reimbursement for us to be able to support our staff in their own growth. We are the beneficiaries of a decrease in VRS rate. So it's good news to come to you and say VRS is not increasing. So that's positive. I mean, that has allowed us to ultimately balance the budget with some other factors. So that's a positive for us. And so there's some other things that are outlined on that slide as well. Trying to incentivize our bus drivers for perfect attendance and supporting some innovation as well with some grant programs. So in all, when you think about Goal 2, slightly under $600,000 in new costs here, largely with our salary increase taking up the significant portion of that overall increase. So our third budget category is looking at efficiency, safety, and compliance. And so one of the things that we want to do is look at some of our funding structures, specifically with our STEM camp, and rather than funding that through our operational budget, much like your enterprise fund, the money that comes in through camper fees is paid out through the cost of paying the instructors and the resources associated with that. Some of our infrastructure inside our classrooms is aging. Our Promethean, our interactive whiteboards that we have in our classrooms, they're starting to malfunction, and so the budget includes some funds for us to replace those old projectors with newer projectors, and we want to have a sustainable replacement program over time. Technology certainly is part of our DNA and something that we're doing, so as we look at the cost of returning our leases back to the vendor, we need to make sure that we're returning them back in fair condition so that we can get our return on our investment there. And then, as I said before, reducing the burden on our families so that we reduce the cost of the iPad insurance from $30 to $20 and the laptop insurance from $50 to $35. We're still covering cost here, we're still protecting our investment, but through we looked at actuarials and we said, what do we really need to do to fund that insurance program? And these are the fees that we have settled on. Some other technology things for efficiency purposes and using our talent the right way is migrating to the cloud for some management services that we have at a cost of $26,000. And then protecting our infrastructure and our investments in technology with some cybersecurity software at about $8,000. We have committed also to a capital improvement plan and maintaining the investment you have made in our resources, and so adding some additional funds to our maintenance budget for facilities to the tune of $40,000. So this is a summary of that, $361,000 for Goal 3, and that is outlined in greater detail here, but I hit some of the highlights previously. So that's a lot of money. If you add that all up, that's more than the revenue that we have coming in the door. So we have to make some adjustments, right? We have to cut. We have to use dollars differently, and we have to make some changes to how we're going to expend some funds. So we really looked hard at every individual budget line, and we looked at how we can fund things in a textbook budget versus operations. We looked at things how we can fund it in an enterprise fund versus operations. We looked at strategically abandoning some positions and recreating them one way so we can meet the needs over here. We looked at our fuel, we looked at our utilities, we looked at what we're doing in every aspect of our operations, and through that analysis we're able to save over $400,000 through strategic abandonment. So we had all those additions, some subtractions, and at the end of the day a total increase in our full-time equivalents of slightly over 3 FTEs, because we added some, we took some away. And then overall, an increase in our budget of slightly under $1.1 million. So we added, we subtracted, and at the end of the day, budget increasing by slightly under $1.1 million. So if you look at that in summary, we would expect that the majority of our funds should be spent on instruction. Should not be administrative heavy, should not be operational heavy, it should be on our core business, and that is teaching and learning. So if you think about the technology we need to accomplish that and the instructional resources, 78% of this proposed budget is dedicated towards technology and instruction. And as we would expect, We don't have equipment that teaches our students. We are a people-heavy business. It takes staff to be able to accomplish our objectives, and so 83% of this budget is dedicated towards salary and benefits, as you would expect, and that's in line with how it's been in the past. So the big question is, how in the heck are we going to pay for this? Where's the money going to come from? That's the big question. We are right now at this point in time the beneficiary of a strong state budget based on the governor's budget. So this is based on the governor's budget. You know, we're going to expect to get some additional state money. Now the Senate has their version, the House has their version. We can only hope that that would benefit us and be better for us, but this is balanced at this point in time based off of the governor's budget. And so a little bit of money and some state sales tax is going to increase and help us, but the other state aid categories are really going to boost us up to an increase of 7.15%. So that has really helped us along the way. And you can see, fortunately, steadily over time, the amount of state revenue that we're receiving is increasing. So that's been a very, very big positive for us. But we can't accomplish anything without your support. And you have been tremendous cheerleaders for our school division. You're at events, you are in our corner, and you have done amazing things to help us to be successful. And it truly has been a partnership with you in the school board. I really enjoy working with John Badesky, and he recognizes the importance of what we do and as educators, and so it's truly a pleasure to work in a community where education is a priority for us, and you have certainly put that to the top of the work that you do, so we're very, very grateful for that. And as Mr. Badesky included in his proposal to you for your consideration, this budget includes an additional $760,000 in local money for us to be able to accomplish the needs that have been previously outlined, which is an increase of what you have supported us in the past, and one that we are very thankful for your consideration and ask for your strong consideration going forward. So the budget is built off of 69% of our total revenue coming from the county, 23% coming from the Commonwealth, and some other little bit of money from the federal and other local revenues, but by and large it's the support that you provide for us that allows us to be successful. And you can see over time how that has changed and the distribution of that, looking at those variety of different revenue sources. But it's balanced. And I think as we started this budget process back in October, I thought, how in the heck are we ever going to be able to accomplish what we need with the revenue that we think that we might get? But through hard work and through a lot of collaboration and cooperation, we were able to provide you a balanced budget for your consideration, a balanced budget that's allowing us to really continue to shine as a leader in the Commonwealth and to accomplish the amazing things that you have seen before and awesome ideas that we have for the future as well. If we receive additional money from any other source, you know, we have a plan for those Tier 1 and those Tier 2 needs. So hopefully the state will write us a big check and we can get some additional money and accomplish some of these things. But we wanted to outline this for you because although they didn't rise to the level of priority at this point in time, these needs certainly don't go away. There are things that you may expect to see in future budgets or maybe future requests that may come across your desk. But we wanted to outline those and to put them in, you know, Tier 1 and Tier 2 categories for your consideration in the future. But we still know there are some uncertainties. Again, this is based off of the governor's budget. We can hope that we get some additional state money, but we'll see what happens coming out of Richmond. We're looking at some federal funds, and hopefully our ROTC program can shift from an NDCC program to a JROTC program, which is a shift of $125,000 that would allow us to be able to accomplish more objectives in this budget. So continuing our advocacy on that front. And then ADM projections, we certainly have done our best based on the enrollment work that we've done to project our ADM, but you never know how that may change as well. So in the transmittal letter that has been sent to Mr. Peterson from Mr. Lumpkins and our school board, there is an ask for a lump sum appropriation. That partnership and collaboration that you have created together has really created a significant, strong bond and a great tie. We oftentimes bring categorical transfer requests to you for your consideration, and you have approved them, and ask as you go forward to make decisions in the FY19 year that you consider potentially a lump sum appropriation. So a request coming from the school board for your deliberation in the future. Mr. Badesky mentioned the capital budget, and I'll tell you, based on the events from last week where school security is on everybody's mind at this point in time, I know that there are communities that are going to go to supervisors and local county commissioners and ask for money for safety. But this budget and the budget that you are considering already includes money for safety. Over $1 million in safety upgrades. And so I'm thankful so much that you are considering that. Money that can be very well spent to increase the security of our buildings and make sure that we're providing a safe place for our students and our staff every day. In addition to that, some funds set aside for construction of a new Goochland Elementary School, a school bus, and some roof replacement work that we want to do at Randolph Elementary School. So again, as you make difficult decisions, certainly ask for your consideration in these capital requests going forward as well. So thankful for all of the time and effort that you are going to put into what you have done to date, and all the public hearings, town halls, and questions that you're going to get on not only our budget, but all the other demands that are placed on your resources going forward. And certainly you have a lot of difficult decisions to make, and ask for your consideration of our requests going forward. Be more than happy to answer any questions that you have.
Board, are there any questions for Dr. Raley? Any comments?
I had, Mr. Chairman, I had 4 questions, and I think the presentation answered them all.
All right.
Anything else? Last that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Raley. Is it Dr. Raley, is it a possibility for us to get a copy of your presentation?
Yes, ma'am.
That would be terrific, because
Yes,
there's kind of flip through some numbers real fast. So,
Yes, ma'am.
yeah, thank you.
Anything else?
Well presented.
Well, Dr. Raley, I'd just like to chime in here and thank you so much for an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
And you've touched on the collaboration between the two boards, and I can tell you, as I travel around Virginia, and probably in your experience and some of our experiences, it is quite unique and it's quite extraordinary to have the level of cooperation we have between the county and the public schools.
Yes, sir.
And the primary beneficiaries of that cooperation are the students, the parents, and the citizens of this county.
Yes, sir.
So I would thank you, and it's not just the two boards, it's yourself, it's the teachers, it's the staff in the schools, it's a team event, and we're all in this together, and it's just amazing to see what can be done if we all work together with a common vision. And so thank you very much for all your efforts.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
All right, can we get a break? Thank you again for that presentation. Before we launch into the next portion of the agenda, which would be some of the agency presentations, I think we're going to take a 5-minute break and then get back together at about, we'll take a 10-minute break. We'll get together at 20 of, so at 4:40. So thank you very much for coming. We'll take a 10-minute break and then reconvene. Presentation.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, board members, Mr. Badesky, Ms. McGee. I heard in Mr. Badesky's presentation, he mentioned a couple things that I wanted to follow up on. He mentioned that we are actively looking for an EMD system, and several people in our office, several people from Fire and Rescue went to Hanover Friday and observed their system to see how it worked. And we were able to glean some good information and find that that is being used by the majority of localities around us, and it may be one we're looking at, even though we will be looking at others. So that process is well underway, and we are having interviews for dispatchers on Thursday. And what has been so remarkable about this particular group is that I'm unfortunately very used to being terribly disappointed by the quality of applicants for deputy sheriff. That wasn't the case for dispatcher. So this is actually the second round of interviews since we have 5 people that we deemed are qualified, and we have the unenviable task of telling 2 of these 5 that we're not going to be able to hire them. So we're taking care of that Thursday, and hopefully by next week we'll have them on board. And moving forward, okay. Let me say first off that I really appreciate the way Mr. Badesky handles the budget, and quite candidly, without any without any way of trying to obscure what he's trying to say, is very direct and way he does budget, and I appreciate it. And I think it's been a real pleasure working with him. Now, having said that, what he's proposed and what I have are two different things, but I do really appreciate the way he's done things, and it's a pleasure to work with him. And I don't know if you hear that very often, but it's from my perspective, I don't say it if I don't mean it, and I mean it. So I appreciate it. Our needs are pretty basic, and there's nothing that you haven't heard from me before. It's the same thing. We need high-quality deputies and dispatchers. We right now are suffering from some real severe manpower crunches. Some of that is due to the fact that we have 4 people on workers' comp right now out of work. 3 of them are veterans. 1 was hurt in training and won't be able to go back to the academy probably until this summer. So we are working from a short deck to start with. We have 2 openings that we have had 4 attempts to fill and have not done so because the quality of applicant is not up to our standards, quite frankly. So while we are doing backgrounds on 2 people right now, they're not done. I don't know how that will pan out. We're not having a whole lot of luck getting the people of the quality that we're used to having. So that is certainly complicating what we're trying to do, because when things happen and they happen fast, we have a great first string, and I'll put them up against anybody. But as time goes on, we don't have a bench, and we can't fill in from the bench. And that is what we're seeing, and that's frankly what my great fear is the county starts on what appears to be the beginning of explosive growth, is that we get behind the 8 ball. So put it in a nutshell, my budget request was for 5 deputies this year and 5 deputies next year. And you heard what Mr. Badesky proposed, and I understand his reasons for doing so. And you have been very good about making sure that we had people to staff the dispatch. So I'm not casting aspersions, I'm just saying what I think my needs are. Our needs are, they're not my needs. So we need an increase in deputy positions, and we asked for 5 for each of the next few years. And I know Mr. Badesky did say he would work with me to see what kind of holes we can plug as we move forward through the budget year. So I appreciate that. And we need the equipment to support the deputies. And in a nutshell, that's what my budget request was all about. Equipment is expensive. It needs to be replaced. It needs to be kept up. And we like to start guys off with new equipment and not badly used equipment. I think our guys do a great job taking care of it. It's primarily Chief Deputy Bucas who takes care of that, and he does a great job doing that. So we try to take care of what we have, and we really appreciate what you've given us in the past. But I know I've given you the numbers before. It costs a little bit over $100,000 per man, startup costs alone, for a new deputy sheriff. So it's not cheap. Okay, I talk about high quality, so I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the accolades that folks in our office have received this year. Let me start off with the first one. That is Mr. Jeff, you listen to WRVA, that's Mr. Jeff Katz, and that is Deputy Ryan Lebo next to him. He was honored back in August on the Blue Friday segment that Mr. Katz does, and he was nominated and was honored. Ryan's a great guy, and he's symptomatic of the type of guy we're looking for. Personable, energetic, willing to learn, and a person of strong integrity. And that's what we need, and that's what we're looking for here. And he certainly exemplifies that. Again, this is Sergeant Bach, and that is Chase. And I know you haven't met Chase like you did Black when he retired, but Greg is a shift sergeant. He's also our dog handler, and that is the photo that showed up on a national website called Police One. It was the photo of the week, and that was a picture that someone submitted of Greg and Chase. The fellow there on the left is Deputy Terry Russell, and that is his supervisor, who's Joe Warren. Terry was recognized by Mothers Against Drunk Driving for outstanding service this past year, and he leads the agency in drunk driving arrests, and he gets a lot of them, and they're not they're very high-quality arrests. So he's doing his part to keep people off the road, drunks off the road. Right here, this was the Masonic Lodge here in Goochland, and that's Jamie Pleasance. Jamie's just recently retired after 43 years of law enforcement. He's been with VCU Police, the state police, with us. He's also retired as a member of the Air National Guard. So Jamie has worn just about every kind of uniform you can wear. He was an E9 in the National Guard, so I know he got a pretty good retirement on that. But Jamie was honored as Deputy of the Year, and that's unusual because he's a part-time deputy. And we try to make great use of our part-time folks so that we can keep people on the road answering calls. In addition, at the same time, this is Denise Whitlow. She was honored as the Dispatcher of the Year. You may remember Denise. She used to work here in this building. She worked in the desk out front back when you had a greeter. And she's done a great job for us and helps us train new deputies, and she'll be very busy, hopefully, in the next couple of weeks. All right, this is a picture of the folks who volunteer their time annually, and this is this year's picture, to deliver presents to the Christmas Mother. And it's deputies, dispatchers, and their families. And we were able to do all that in just a couple hours because we have such great participation. And I guess my point is we have some really outstanding, high-quality people. And if I've learned anything in all these years of being sheriff is that you don't lower your standards simply to fill a position. You're better off working shorthanded and then to lower your standards and take someone who doesn't quite cut the mustard. And that's kind of where we are right now. All right, finally, and I'd like to thank Mr. Badesky because this is Deputy Harrison Hankins, and he was honored by receiving a Valor Award this past year in November. And Mr. Badesky bought a table at the Valor Award ceremony for us to make use of. And so we had good participation with people going down there, and Harrison was honored, as were two other deputies later on, through the Sons of the American Revolution for doing the same thing. I'm going to show you the video here in a second. Some of you may have seen it. I tried to show it to you last year and it didn't work, so I pulled it off the PowerPoint, and hopefully it will work this time. But the video will give you an idea and an understanding of some of the things that happen, how quickly they happen. It will also show how teamwork is essential to saving human life. And it's not just teamwork with us. You'll see there, too, that had it not been for the Company 6 fire truck that arrived on scene when it did, all our efforts would have been in vain. They showed up just in time. We worked together, and we were able to save this man's life. So, Lisa, can you go to the video? Oops. And again, these are with the cameras that you guys allowed us to purchase a couple years ago. They've come in very, very handy, and all this video was taken from body-worn cameras from the deputies on scene. Well, if we get there. Almost there. All right. There we go. Thank you, sir.
Hey, what's your name? Can you hear me? All right, just stay with me. Try not to move too much. I got rescue en route, okay? All right, just stay still. Stay still. I got rescue en route, man. We're doing what we can. I can't hear you. What'd you say? Just stay still, okay? I know you can't. Just stay still. Just stay still, man. You got to try not to move. Stay still. Keep talking. Quick, quick, quick. Quick, boys, come on. Hit it hard, hit it fast. Go, go, go. Watch out, Ron, back up. All right, go, 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 go. Get some water, guys. Some water. Charge. I need a fire extinguisher. I've already used mine. Hey, I need your fire extinguisher. It's growing quick. Here we go. Fire truck, man. Fire truck. I popped the pin on mine, you got it? No, I can't get the damn thing off. Rip that bitch off. I can't fucking get it, Ryan. I know. Here we go, 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 go. Get it off of him. Get the fire off of him. He's conscious in there. Help me stretch his legs. Stretch his legs. Take the line out. Thank you. Here we go. We got water. Hot damn.
Anyhow, that's the incident in which these three guys were honored. And again, the body-worn camera system that we have, while it can sometimes be, it can be kind of a pain in the neck at times, we found it very, very helpful for evidentiary purposes, and particularly when a complaint is made, it's very simple to pull up the video and see whether or not the complaint is founded or not. And you would be surprised that people will make complaints, and then we tell them we're going to review the video, and all of a sudden they decide they don't want to make a complaint. That's happened on a couple of occasions. So we think they're very, very helpful. All right, let me talk a little bit about our service delivery over the past year. As you can see, calls continue to rise. They dropped a little bit last year, but the trend line shows that they've risen quite a bit from 2012, almost 30%. I think you will find the same for the sheriff and for fire and rescue. Even though we had a drop in some of them last year, you didn't have a drop in the fire rescue calls. They are the calls that are really picking up in great volume, and I'm sure you'll hear more than that from the chief. But anecdotally, it's quite remarkable if you listen to the radio to hear the calls that come in on a regular basis. Many of them, maybe the calls don't need to be made, but the bottom line is they are made, and fire and rescue has to respond to them, and they're going up pretty dramatically. We have the civil function, civil process. We're the mail carriers for the court, but we're not just the mail carriers. There are other papers that can be relatively complicated that requires a whole lot of manpower on our part, and those include the temporary detention orders, writs, which are writs of possession, and writs of facia, and evictions. Now, the writs requires usually for us to physically get involved, remove somebody from a home, take a piece of property away from somebody, or to seize property to make good a judgment through the courts. They can be very complicated. They can take lots of time, and they are going up as well, even though we don't have a whole lot of them. One of the things that is going up, and it's pretty remarkable, are writs of possession. And there's a direct correlation between beginning in 2016 and going up in the apartment complexes that we have. We're doing an enormous amount of evictions from the apartment complexes down there on the lower end. And with more coming, we can see more of these on the horizon. And it's something we're going to do regardless. My point is it just takes time and manpower to do it. And so we're doing the best we can to work those in and do what we have to do. ECOs and TDOs, one of the things that the General Assembly likes to talk about and talk about and talk about and never really fix, and that is the temporary detention process. The longest one we had last year was 12 hours and 8 minutes, and that took place on October 30th. That's a long time to sit with someone who's in need of mental health treatment in an emergency room, waiting for a room. It's not easy on the deputies. It's not easy on the patient. It's not easy on any of us. But despite all the talk, nothing's really been fixed. It doesn't come close to the 26-hour one we had about 8 years ago. That's the record. But the average is 4 hours and 20 minutes. That's a long time to get people the treatment they need. There are bills in front of the General Assembly this year that will relieve sheriff's offices and law enforcement agencies from the burden of transporting most people on temporary detention orders, but that's been tried before, and it never really got very far. So I don't know what the upshot of that is. If that happens, that would be a great relief to us that we wouldn't have to do that. But you still have to wait for them until there's bed space found, and bed space is in short supply. Just a trend, getting lots of concealed handgun permit checks every year. Not all of these result in concealed handgun permits, but most of them do. They're very, very rare that someone is not granted a handgun permit by the judge. So if you do the math and you take our population, roughly 10% of the people in Goosen County have a concealed handgun permit, and that's a high percentage, and might be one reason why our burglaries have decreased. Courts. Court days went down a little bit this year. We lost a JDR judge. One of them retired, so we lost a few days on the docket, but they've picked back up, and the new juvenile judge has picked up those days, so we expect to see more. Just so you know, we are statutorily required to provide a minimum of 2 deputies for circuit court and 1 for each for the JDR courts. 1 is not really enough. It's not safe if you have just 1 deputy in the courtroom, not to mention the fact that we have to move inmates back and forth from the holding cells to the various courts, and then we have to take them back to jail. So court days when we're busy, another manpower stressor on us. It gives you some idea how activity in the court's picking back up, although the trend line shows it's steady. You can see over the last few years we've been picking up gradually in the number of people that are going through screenings in the district court. Ideally, we should have something like this in circuit court as well to prevent somebody from smuggling a weapon in. However, if you take a look at the Goosen County Courthouse, there is no place to do it. The only way to do it is to do it out on the steps in the weather, which really isn't ideal for someone that might have to be there for up to 8 hours. So someday, hopefully, we will have a means to do that to prevent people who don't like their divorce hearing, or they don't like the custody hearing, or they don't want to go to jail, can't get somebody in. Our guys have done a great job paying attention to who's coming in and out, but is it possible that someone could get through our courts, through our court building with a weapon? Yeah, in circuit court, it's possible. Less likely in district court, but certainly possible in circuit court, because we don't have the technology or the means to check them. Prisoner transport mileage, again, over the last few years is going up. When we bring people to court, we have to pick them up at the jail, and we have to take them back. And so that engenders a lot of transportation mileage on our part. And we try to do it as safely as possible and put as many people as we can in a single vehicle so we don't have to take multiple trips. But sometimes we're going all over the state taking people back and forth. going to Norfolk, or going to Fairfax, or going to Roanoke. So we never know exactly where somebody who did something that's not supposed to here is going to get picked up across the state. All right, this is a refresher for you. We're divided into 6 beats, and I have some numbers that correspond to your, they don't exactly correspond to your districts, but this gives you some idea of where the activity in your districts might be. And it shouldn't be any surprise to you that over the last 6 years, the vast majority of the calls that we respond to are in the northeast sector, which is Centerville. And that's consistent from calls to traffic accidents to everything else. Why? When you concentrate people in an area, you have more opportunity for conflict, for accident, for theft, for, mayhem. So that's the reason why. The second one, obviously, is southeast and central west, which is right here in the courthouse. And I think one reason why those numbers are so high is that we have a number of schools here. We also have a lot of people who come to the sheriff's office in person to make a complaint, and it gets logged as a call using 2938 River Road West as the address. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's as high as it is, because when you look at where we're actually going for the most part to the northeast and the southeast sectors where the growth is. Okay, this year. The trend is consistent. The percentages are just about the same. 27% of the calls we go to are in the northeast sector. 28% of the traffic accidents we go to are in the northeast sector, and correspondingly to the others. This is something that's quite noticeable. We're going to a lot more traffic accidents, and these are reportable accidents. And again, this is a refresher. A reportable traffic accident is one that includes death or injury or damage of $1,500 or greater. And $1,500 doesn't take long to get to $1,500 anymore. That's just about every accident. But we respond to a lot more than this, but a lot of them are deer crashes or fender benders in parking lots and things like that, so they don't get reported to DMV. These are the ones that get reported to DMV, and they're going up. This is the table that you guys always are interested in. I'll make sure you get it, the full table. These are just the top 10 intersections by crash. By a long shot, the one that we've all recognized, and that's brought in 288, and it prevailed upon VDOT to please do something about it. I don't know where we are with that. I hope we're getting somewhere, because it's not getting better, it's getting worse. Again, as you might suspect, our traffic accidents are around the growth corridors. One thing that's interesting is if you look down at Wilkes Ridge and Broad, that intersection didn't exist until 2014, and it's already moved into the top 10 intersections for accidents. So I guess what I'm saying is that I think we can expect, as we get more apartment complexes, as we get hospitals, as we get retail, as we get hotels, and we have traffic lights, and we have congestion coming from short pump into roads that already can't handle what we already have, we can expect a whole lot more, and all of that is very manpower intensive. We don't write a whole lot of traffic tickets here. We try to write what I call good tickets. We don't want to load up on people. If you have somebody that's got a bald tire or tail light out, an expired inspection sticker, and he was going recklessly down Route 6, let's just deal with the reckless and forget about the others and get him to take care of them. There's no sense in loading up on people. That's not the way it is everywhere. So we try to write good tickets. That money, that fine money, since we write it under county ordinance, that money comes back to the general fund. And I think it was about $150,000 last year, John, somewhere on that number. I'm not really sure what it was. Somewhere around that. We don't see it. It comes right back to the county, so we don't benefit from it. But that money does come back. But that's not why we're out there. We're not out there to try to raise funds. We're out there trying to keep it safe. And here's an example. These are traffic stops compared to traffic summonses. And about 36% of the time we write a ticket after a traffic stop. So most of the time we say, hey, slow it down, take care of it, and we don't issue a summons. And I don't have those, I didn't bring those numbers with me, but we do keep statistics on by race and sex, just in case anyone has a question, and they're not anything that should cause any concern for anyone. Our arrests were up last year. I think, again, I haven't gotten to the slide yet. I'll get to the crime rate in a few minutes, but I think we're going to see that our crime rate is gradually starting to creep up. And they're not violent crimes, but they're property crimes. We're getting a lot of thefts. We're getting a lot of car break-ins. I know Mr. Minnick asked me about that a couple of weeks ago down in his area. Unfortunately, thieves from around the metropolitan Richmond area are going into cars and they're stealing things. And they're usually going into unlocked cars where valuables are clearly visible. Sometimes they're breaking windows. Most of the time they don't have to because people aren't locking the cars. So it's a problem, and that, of course, drives the property crime rate up. As fate would have it, the General Assembly's decided to raise the felony threshold to $500. So they'd have to steal a whole lot from your car to be charged with a felony, right? And it would just be a petty larceny now if they raise that. DUI arrests are up, going up, at a pretty steady rate year upon year. A lot of those are clustered once again from the short pump area, from the restaurants there. We're catching a lot of people on 250 at the intersections, getting confused, haven't had too much to drink. They're not from around here. They're passing through and getting confused on our roads. I think the guys are doing a good job of getting them off the road. Okay, we had a few things happen this past year that I thought I'd recap. This is one of our guys. He's still on workers' comp. That was almost exactly a year ago. He's supposed to find out from a doctor next month whether or not he can come back to work. I don't know if he will or not, but we've been shorthanded. He's one of the ones that's on workers' comp. So we haven't had him at the schools because he was a school resource officer. So it's put more strain on Ryan Lebo, who is there. And we'll try to get that straight. This was a case last year at the apartment complex at the Notch. It turned out to what looked like initially to be about a 2-acre crime scene, because this was an Army veteran who had some issues and was in a wheelchair, and in the mental state he was in, he was dragging his feet on the pavement and left about a 3/8 of a mile track of blood trail around the apartment complex, and then died, unfortunately, in his wheelchair in the middle of the parking lot. The reason I mention this is when we get there, we didn't know whether it was an accidental death, whether it was a homicide, or exactly what had happened. So we took probably 10 guys the bulk of the day to block off that parking lot, much to the inconvenience of the people who lived there, to do a thorough crime scene just in case it turned out to be foul play. Fortunately, it wasn't, but still, it was a very unfortunate incident. Again, I suspect we can see more unusual things like that in the near future. This gentleman was arrested for the distribution of methamphetamine. So we're starting to see, again, a pickup in drug activity. We executed 2 search warrants Friday for drugs, back to back. One was a very sophisticated marijuana grow operation. The other dealt with marijuana and cocaine. So we are doing a lot behind the scenes that you probably don't hear about because we don't really have a news source to let you know about it. But we're very busy working on these things, and we're very fortunate to have a retired DEA agent who is now one of our sergeants of investigations. He was a special agent in charge in Detroit and a few other places, so he's very knowledgeable and has been very helpful in working some of these cases and things that aren't related to drugs. This was the 25th anniversary Citizens Academy reunion back in October. We've been doing it a long time, and there are a few people there that came to the first one. I can't see them, my glasses, but they're in there.
I'm in there right in the middle if you're looking.
Are you there, Manny? Where are you?
But I'm kind of hidden.
Okay. Well, there's Tommy Woodson. He was a member of the First Citizens Mechanic class 25 years ago, and you're in there somewhere, but I can't see you. Anyhow, this one of the first times we got to show off the new ECC EOC building, which, by the way, is really nice. We've gotten nothing but great reviews from other people who have come to look at it, and the people are now coming to see what we've done when they are planning their own building. So that was a long time coming, but was very well done. And thank you for that. We needed it. We're actively working a murder. This took place in September on Sandy Hook Road, just south of the Louisa line. I can tell you it was a drug-related murder. We've not gotten to the bottom of it yet. We've been to the grand jury about a half a dozen times. We hope that we will. We have a pretty good idea what happened, but we don't have enough evidence to charge, so hopefully we will. It seems that the murder investigations we get are always quite complicated. This was obviously the Bethany Stevens death investigation. Unfortunately, the national and international media took great interest in this case. We spent hour upon hour upon hour working on this case and doing what we thought was a very thorough investigation. Just a few minutes ago, just before I came to this meeting, I released a report to the media since they've made many, many inquiries about whether or not we had received all the reports we have. We've gotten reports from the medical examiner, from the Department of Agricultural Division of Veterinary Medicine, and the Division of Forensic Sciences. We've gotten them all in the last few days, so we released a summary to the news media. And the bottom line is the scientific evidence that we submitted substantiates what we've been saying all along, and that the lady was killed by her dogs. So it was very, very unfortunate. It's been tough for the family. It's been tough for us. We've received negative comments from around the world consistently, because from dog lovers particularly, who aren't going to believe the information that we just released to them today any more than they did before. But nonetheless, we did that because the news media has been very, very interested in this case. Okay, that's it. Just to recap, if we are going to continue to get high-quality people and attract high-quality people, I would ask that you consider a commitment to regular upgrades of salary and benefits, because the people that we're competing with, while we have many, many neighbors, we don't compete for people with Powhatan. We don't compete with Cumberland. We don't compete with Fluvanna. We compete with Hanover, Chesterfield, the City of Richmond, and the State Police, all of whom have enhanced their benefit packages and salary. So we would just ask that you bear that in mind as you look at things, so that we can get the best people and we don't have to lower standards. We need increased people to match the growth that we know is coming. Plain and simple. We've asked for an increase in overtime funding, which I believe Mr. Badesky has agreed to in his budget, because we are carrying hundreds and hundreds of hours of compensatory time, which is, as I understand it, the auditors consider a liability to the county, because this is time that is owed to people, but we haven't had the overtime funds to pay them. Now, we've tried to manage that through time off, but we're so shorthanded now that you really can't be in a position to tell people that they need to take time off, because we don't have people to fill positions. And finally, the regular replacement and upgrade of software, equipment, and vehicles. And Mr. Badesky has got that covered in his budget too, so we appreciate that. And I really, really thank you for all that you've done. I know you got a tough job. You've done real well by us. I appreciate it. I hope I don't sound like I'm whining or fussing. I'm just trying simply to tell you what I fear and what I see coming if we're not prepared for it. And that is the basis of my budget presentation. Be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you, Sheriff. Board, questions for the Sheriff? You have any? I just, real quickly, had a couple of things, Sheriff. One, you showed us the top 10 list that
Yes.
generated a lot of activity for you. And I think number 1 was Broad and 288.
By a long shot.
And I thought I heard you say something like, I'm not sure where that stands, so I thought I might give you the update on where
Okay.
that stands. The last time VDOT came in, they let us know that the intersection Broad, both the east and west side of that intersection between Broad and 288, that has been approved for an upgrade and has been fully funded for an upgrade. And as we stand now, I believe about 40% of the architectural design work has been done, and they're due to turn dirt and break ground. I think it's 2021. Does that sound true? I think it's around the 2021 timeframe. So approved, fully funded.
2021.
They're moving as
Gotcha.
quickly as they can. It's-
76 more accidents.
But my point with that is perhaps your number 1 intersection might drop down a few years out in the future if all works according to plan. There was another one, I believe, in the top 10 was Patterson and West Creek.
Right.
That I believe has also been approved and fully funded for an upgrade. That one I think is on a little faster track.
That's a light in 2019, as I recall. Is that
So
correct?
there you go. So
Okay.
that's a year, 18 months, so that's a little faster track. So perhaps those two would either drop in the rankings, or maybe some of them will drop off your rankings at some point and free up some time. So I wanted to give you that update. since,
Okay, very good.
The second thing I had.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair,
yeah,
sorry.
sure.
Also, I-64 in Ashland, which I think is also
Yes.
in your top 10. We had a meeting with VDOT and Kimley-Horn, I think, last week, and the options for that intersection have been laid out. I don't recall if a decision was reached on how, which preference they're headed, or they're leaning towards, but that one will also start to go through the programming and approval phase.
Good. Would you all like me to send you that table that I
Please.
have on a spreadsheet? Okay,
Please.
I'll do that. Yes.
And if I could add just one more thing, I think what also is helpful is knowing, the gross number. I mean, the $1,500 or the $1,500 threshold for reporting is good, but I
Yes.
think all accidents at those intersections, I think if you're responding and no is a helpful.
Okay, that's
I know
not
it's
gonna,
hard to get probably.
I can do that. The reason I went with the reportable is because I know it's consistent data.
Yeah.
The other ones may not be quite as consistent or as easy to nail down within a certain distance of the
Right.
intersection, but I can give you all accidents, many of which turn out to be not accidents at all. It's just reported as. But I can get that for you.
Okay. So perhaps we can work together to try and reduce the demand for your services. Not that we want to put you out of business, but if we can work together in ways to keep.
Oh, that's just one phase, Mr. Peters.
If we can try to keep the county safe together, work together for increased safety, that would be great. So anything
Super.
we can do from our end, just make sure you let us know, and we'll do what we can to help minimize the safety hazards. That was the second one. You also had mentioned 5 deputies. I think it was for each of the next 2 years.
Yes.
Could you give us just 2 seconds on how you came up with those numbers in
Sure.
terms of coverage, or what it would provide
Sure.
you in terms of increased level of service, that kind of thing?
All right, bear with me.
Okay.
We are, right now, we are staffed fairly well in investigations. It's the patrol end where we need help. This is where we're really trying to plug holes. So if you think about it in terms of the number of, and let's think in terms of weeks. In a week, there are 168 hours. If you assume a 40-hour work week, it takes 5 people to cover 1 person around the clock. Why do I say that? Because if 5 times 4 is 200, that leaves 32 hours. Well, once you subtract training, holidays, court time, vacation time, you basically have to have those 5 people to increase your patrol function by 1 man around the clock. Now, those 5 guys will be divided into the patrol sectors that they need to be in. But in order to do that, that's how many you need. And so it's hard for folks that aren't working a 24-hour day to think in terms of those numbers. But since we don't close, and since we have people out around the clock, that's how I come up with those
So
numbers.
during that 2-year time frame, you'd be net adding two patrol at
Two patrol around the
24/7.
clock. 24/7, theoretically, assuming that, there isn't great sickness or family medical leave or all the other variables that come into play when you're trying to schedule.
And would they be assigned to one of the existing districts, or would you create a
They were
new
not going to be
district,
assigned to a
or-
district, they're going to be assigned to a patrol platoon, essentially, because we rotate that amongst all of them. No one stays in any one area. We want everybody to be familiar with all areas of the county.
Sure.
So that's rotated throughout a shift. Different folks are rotated to different parts of the county. But the bottom line is it would increase the number of people on each shift theoretically by 2.
Okay, so that'd be 2 steering wheels to go with those 2 sets of boots on the ground? Is that-
Right.
Okay, and then, of course, equipment and all that.
Right.
Okay, and then you mentioned you do have some openings now, and you're having difficulty finding the caliber of individual that you'd
Correct.
like to introduce into our system. Do you have any information on why that's the case? You mentioned you've seen a drop off from where we have been in the past. We're just not seeing what we need. Is there, if you had to speculate as to what might be some of those causes?
I have some ideas. I mean, it's not scientific, but I've seen this before. It's cyclical. A few years ago, prior to 9/11, we had the same issue. People simply didn't want to go into law enforcement. 9/11 came along. All of a sudden, law enforcement was being elevated as something special by the press and by people. All of a sudden, we started getting an increase in applications. The climate right now is not good for law enforcement. The national media climate, the narrative that is being put out by certain groups is not good. Young people, young millennial people who think a little bit differently than I do, aren't being attracted to this business where you don't get days off, where you have to work midnights, where you miss family time, where you might get shot at, where you might get hurt. That's what they're thinking. And we all know that. We all assumed those risks when we took the job.
Right.
But you have that. So there are good qualified people out there, but every good agency is going after that same guy, and you have to have a means to compete.
Is there anything we can do?
Well, I had mentioned to Mr. Badesky that I think one of the reasons we did so well up until a few years ago is that we were not remarkably ahead of our neighbors in starting pay, but we were ahead, and that makes a difference. It gets people in the door if you have a starting salary that is higher than your neighbors, even if it's only a few $100s. So we don't have the specialties that Henrico, Hanover City, the state police have. We can't afford it. We don't have the time for it. And that is how they market. That's how those agencies market themselves to young people. And we can't do that. We have a whole lot of other things we can sell here. This is a great place to live and work. No doubt.
So your sense is that if we were competitive at one point, we're becoming less competitive for the entry
We're
level?
competitive. We're no longer leading the pack.
Okay.
And I think that makes a difference.
All right, good. Thank you. I appreciate that. We saw a couple of disturbing videos and slides
Yes.
about crime scenes. Do you feel like your sheriff deputies are getting the support they need because they're going through a traumatic situation to respond? They're not going through the actual event, but they're responding and they're being confronted. Do you feel like they're getting their support they need to work through those issues?
Yes, I will have to say that overwhelmingly the people in this community support the deputies.
Okay.
That's not, the national issue is not the issue here. Where it manifests itself is not the people who live in Goosen, but the people we deal with, a lot of them are passing through.
Right.
So the same bad guys that are acting out in other places act out here. So it's not the local people, but we are dealing with a whole lot of transient folks coming through that subscribe to that theory. But yes, they do get the support from the community, no doubt about it.
Okay, good, because I know monetary compensation is one aspect of the job, but when they're confronted with those kinds of traumatic situations, to provide the kind of holistic support of them to make sure that they
One of
understand.
the things that's hard here, Mr. Peterson, and this is not news to you, it's the same for teachers and others, it's hard for entry-level folks to live here.
Right, sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's not your fault, my fault, or anyone else's, just the way it is.
Thank you. The last thing I had is real quick is you mentioned the growth prospects going forward, that perhaps the increased demand on your services going forward, perhaps some shifting demands. I guess on behalf of this board, I would invite you to come back, not just once a year for a budget session, but whenever you feel there's some daylight developing or some gap in coverage developing, to please come back and give us an update. Also, perhaps to attend the VDOT updates to see how they're doing with the traffic intersections and those kinds of things, so that we can work even closer together.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Anybody else have anything else for the sheriff? Well, thank you. It was an excellent presentation.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for all the good work you do.
I sit behind the desk, the deputies do the hard lift.
Well, then thank them on our behalf then.
All right.
Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is fire rescue. Chief, do you want to come forward? I guess you don't need to give us your name and address or keep your remarks to 3 minutes.
Is the light going to come on?
But no, I think you can take the time you need. Thank you, Chief.
Good afternoon, board members, Ms. McGee, Mr. Podesky, Mr. Skawitz. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you how we in fire rescue have spent our citizens' money and how we plan to spend the future money that the citizens give to us. We certainly appreciate the opportunity to share our accomplishments and share our vision for the future and what we've done in the past with those money. Just a reminder that we have some primary functions. Obviously, we have evolved, as some of you heard me say several months ago, we are not your grandfather's fire service. We are not your father's fire rescue service. We have evolved, and we are now an all-hazards fire rescue service that delivers a multitude of services to our community, some of which we'll highlight as we go through here. But we want to make sure that Goochland County is well protected, and our members have the skill set that they need to address all of those hazards that threaten the safety, health, and economic well-being of the residents, businesses, and visitors to Goochland County. That involves not just the traditional fire rescue services, but that involves what's commonly termed in our industry as evolving technological threats. They could be hazardous materials events. They could be transportation-related events. They could be active shooters in an office building. They could be school shootings. They could be anything and everything in between. That unfortunately, that's the nature of our business today, that we are in that all hazards business. But as also, as you heard me say many times, we want to make sure that our citizens are the best protected citizens that they can be, and that starts in their own home by making sure we educate those citizens to minimize or prevent them ever having to call 911 to utilize our services. You've heard me say before, the best emergency that we ever respond to is the one we never have to go to. And that's true. We want to make sure that those residents and businesses within the community have the skill set to make them more resilient, more resistant to the threats that they face in their business community and in their own homes as well. And lastly, well, not lastly, but another one of our primary functions is to make sure that we as a local government are best prepared. We in fire rescue, as I said, wear a multitude of hats. One of them is the emergency management hat. And we want to make sure that our county workforce is best prepared as it possibly can, because a community is not measured by how it responds to incidents when there's a natural disaster. Just look at Puerto Rico right now. What is the measuring stick in Puerto Rico right now is not the event, but is the recovery. The recovery. That's what everybody's getting criticized about, not those first 48 hours after the event occurred. That's what's not people getting criticized about in Florida or Texas. They get criticized, especially at the local government level, about how well you recover from that event, how well you establish some sense of normalcy back to the citizens. That's how we as a government will be measured, and that's what we view as our role in the emergency management community, as best preparing our workforce to respond to those threats and making sure that we instill in our workforce and instill in turn in our citizens a feeling that Goochland County has it. Goochland County is going to be there. Goochland County is going to step to the plate, not to necessarily to provide everything to anybody, but that we're still functioning. We're still not being, as New Orleans was, a dysfunctional government following Katrina. We have, like many agencies, have a lot of goals. We want to respond to all of our calls for assistance in a timely and professional manner. The measuring stick for that is national standards say that you should have an ALS unit on scene within 8 minutes, and a fire resource should be there within 5 minutes. We're no different than any other locality. Our residents deserve the same level of service when they dial 911 as they are in Henrico, Chesterfield, Hanover, or any other community in the country. And we want to make sure that we have a timely and professional manner of a response. Now, professional has nothing to do with whether you get a salary or not for your service. It has everything with how you conduct business, how you provide service to your community. It has nothing to do with whether you get a salary or not. We create order out of chaos. It's people's worst day that we respond to. They've got a child that has a SIDS emergency. They've got a loved one that's having a heart attack. They've come home from shopping and they find that their house is on fire. We try to help them create some order out of chaos, and we do that with dignity and respect to everybody, regardless of their socioeconomic status within the community. We recognize and support and value the financial investment that this county and its citizens have made in our services, and we understand that we have a tremendous fiscal responsibility associated with that. You've heard me say that fire rescue business is not cheap. An engine is $600,000, an ambulance is $250,000 plus. SCBA is, $5,000. Self-contained breathing apparatus. I'm sorry, sometimes I use acronyms. Is $5,000, and the new radio system, as you just, were so kind to fund, is an expensive proposition. The radios that we carry alone are several $1,000s. So it's not a cheap business, but we want to make sure that and the citizens know that we value the investment that you've made in us, and we treat that equipment with respect. And we want to make sure, much like the sheriff just said, that we have a highly skilled and diverse workforce that combines both our volunteers and career members as equal partners. We are unique. We are what is classified as a combination fire rescue service. We have career people working side by side. Not too far away from here, I can show you a combination system that does not have people working side by side. They literally have 2 different fire stations that are within 3 blocks of each other. The career staff stays in one, and the volunteer staff stays in another. Can you imagine how functional that team is when they show up on the playing field? I don't think so. Our people work side by side every single day in the same firehouse, and oftentimes on the same vehicle as an integral team member. We have some performance measures. You've heard me say that before. You adopted in 2013 to comply with the statewide EMS standards, some standards for EMS delivery, 15 minutes for the East End, 20 minutes for the West End. In 2016, we were 75% compliant with that in the East End, and in 2017, we raised that to 80.36 and had a total of 932 responses for that. In the West, we went from 88, a slight increase to 88.02. But the interesting thing here is where everybody talks about the east end of Goochland County being the growth end. We had 1,394 responses in the west end of the county and only 932 in the east end of the county. Our busiest area after midnight is the Fife area, of the county. I thought you were going to ask a question.
Well, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
That's all right.
Why do you think that is?
Why is it? It's because that's when people are home. During the day, they're out conducting business. They're at work. They're shopping. Their kids are at school and things like that. Our population center at night shifts from the business community in the East End to the west end of the county when people are at home in their residential homes, and that's when they're generating a business for us, I should say. So, yeah, we have 8,000 or 10,000 people that show up to work in West Creek, but at night, where do they go?
they're back to Chesterfield and Henrico County generating work for their fire and EMS service. Our people who live in Fife, who live in Haydensville, who live in the west end of the courthouse area, they go to work in Chesterfield and Henrico and Hanover, but at the end of the day, they come back to Goochland. And that's where they spend 2/3 of their life, back here in Goochland, instead of the 1/3 when they're at work. We also want to increase the percentage of our members attending training. We think that training is one of the most important things that we do. As you heard me talk about evolving technological hazards, we have to stay on top of that. And last year, you were fortunate enough to give us some additional funding to allow us to use our platform of Target Solutions, which is a web-based product to deliver training to our members wherever they may be. If they have access to a smartphone, they can access their account and do training. They can get their continuing education requirements for their EMS certifications sitting at their home, sitting at a computer desk, or sitting at the fire station. Some of our recent accomplishments: we've rewritten and adopted, as you've adopted, the Emergency Operations Plan for Goochland County, which was required every 5 years. We are now staffing additional stations with the additional bodies that you've given us, the East End, the Center, and we've started periodically staffing Company 4 on a more regular basis when our staffing levels permit. And we just recently completed phase 1 of our hydraulic rescue tool project. In fact, tonight is our last night of training on those new tools. We've been doing that for the last 3 nights, or Saturday last night and tonight. So we're excited about that. Those are really going to enhance our operation. And we could have used them. I wish we would have had them last Friday night, because we had a serious car accident out on Haydensville Fife Road, and we were using the older tools. We would have been a much smoother, more efficient operation with the newer tools. We've partnered with the Sheriff's Office, as you've heard me before, and we deliver the public safety class, which is a year-round class now at Goochland High School at no additional cost to the taxpayers. We've improved our ISO rating across the county from a 6.9 to a 5.5Y. And most importantly, the Crozier station is now recognized. Those individuals who lived in Crozier were paying astronomical rates. Some were being canceled for their homeowners insurance. And now that station is recognized, and they have a acceptable level of ISO coverage. With your help, we've implemented a new 7800 public safety radio system, and you've heard me talk about the flying engine concept before, about putting an engine company in service that's staffed with 4 individuals who can respond to incidents that occur throughout the county instead of having just 2 people here or 1 person there. We combine those resources, and we now become an efficient firefighting resource. So here you see some pictures. It's a real busy slide about our operations budget. One of the things that we did this year, if you recall, when you first took office, we had 4 separate budgets within fire rescue. We had the operating budget, we had a training budget, we had the grants budget, and we had an emergency management budget. We combined several of them a couple of years ago, and we've done some further combination of the revenue recovery budget into the operations budget. The revenue recovery used to be a standalone budget. It's no longer a standalone budget. It's now combined into the operations budget. So some of those numbers you see may scare you as far as an increase go, but those budgets have been combined to one. And you see an overall personnel costs of 12.72%, and that correlates with the 5 additional positions that the county administrator is recommending. For the record, we did request 6, and the county administrator was only able to grant us the 5 positions, and we certainly appreciate anything we can get at that level. At the bottom of the chart, you see some of the full-time growth, as Dr. Raley alluded to. Everybody wants to know about FTEs and things like that all the time. We've increased in 2017 from 28. 18 we went to 36, and you can see it as it continues to go up there. Our budget, for all intent and purposes, is fairly flatlined with the exception of the additional personnel costs. So you'll see that those 5 additional firefighter EMS providers, as I said, we've combined our operations and cost recovery budgets. We have an increase in call volume, and when you have an increase in call volume, you're using more EMS supplies. They're 80% of the business that we do, so they're extremely expensive, and we're going to use that. We have a decrease in volunteer participation. That's reality, and it doesn't matter whether you're coaching Little League or you're in any other volunteer-based organization nowadays across our country. You're seeing a decrease in volunteerism across the country. One of the things we did last year, if you recall, several years we had funded a crew leader position. We have now gotten to the point in our organizational structure that we needed some mid-level supervision, so we reclassified those crew leaders to lieutenant's positions, so we can do two things with that: provide some mid-level supervision to give Chief Ferguson some relief in having to manage those individuals that were direct reports to him. Now he's got some help with there. And also, as I said, volunteerism is decreasing, and our volunteer district chiefs need help in managing the stations. Where historically our members came from within the Goochland community, now many of our members, in fact 70% of them in the East End, come from outside of Goochland County. We value their service. We need them to continue to come to Goochland and provide service for us, but they are not the future leaders of Goochland County Volunteer Fire Rescue. The individuals here within Goochland County have community buy-in. Those individuals who come from the county come here to come outside the county, come here to do their duty nights, and then they go back to their other communities. So we need to provide some assistance to those district chiefs who are running those stations and doing a great job with that, but they need some assistance with that supervision that they historically had that came from within the community, and that didn't exist. Our lieutenants and captains, if you recall our budget process, our staffing matrix for firefighters is we have firefighter EMT, we have firefighter intermediate, which is a higher level of ALS care, and then we have firefighters who are paramedics. So there's 3 separate pay bands for the firefighters. Once you got promoted to lieutenant or captain, that pay band kind of eliminated itself because there's only one rank of lieutenant, there's only one rank of captain. So we had to provide an ALS stipend for those individuals in order to continue to utilize their service. That was only fair. They come to us with a higher level of training. They're providing additional service, and we needed to compensate them appropriately in order to remain competitive with our partners in the other localities. Vehicle maintenance and repairs have gone up. You've heard me talk about that. I'm not going to bore you to death with any of those things. Uniforms and protective gear continues to go up, and we need to outfit our new members that are coming on board. And as I said, EMS supplies go up. With the absorption of the revenue recovery budget into the general budget, for lack of a better word, historically the association got a carve-out of $40,000, I believe it was last year, just shy of $40,000 of that, and that was used to do some things that they did. They paid the OMD stipend, they did some maintenance at the stations and everything else like that. It was thought that it would be best, and we met with the association, we met with their board of directors, and best to absorb that into the general fund, do away with most of the money in the stipend, or most of the money in that budget line, most of that $40,000, and then the county become responsible for the things that you see there, the OMD stipend, the alarm lease and monitoring service. While the county doesn't own the buildings, the county has a tremendous investment in the equipment that's in those buildings. So it's in our best interest to make sure that we have those buildings monitored, and it's only fair that we take on some of that cost. As we add more career people to the stations, they're generating trash 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Likewise, eliminate the trash from the station to have that cost assumed by that. Office and janitorial supplies, copier leases, those things as you see up there have now been absorbed into one budget line. There is still some funding that exists in that line called member services to pay for things that are unique to our volunteer partners, such as dues and things like that for other associations that they belong to that are volunteer-centric, but for the most part, that's been absorbed into this line. Our emergency planning grant, this is flat. This is money that comes passed through from the state. Some of it has a match. The 4 for Life is passed through. The ATL, Assistance to Localities from the Fire Programs Fund, is a pass-through. And the only one that has a match is the Emergency Management Planning Grant, that EMPG grant, has a match of $16,905, and we get $32,000 out of that, or $33,000 now. Like others, we have future outlooks and challenges. Our availability of volunteers is declining, a 2-year decline of about 24.18% in volunteer rescue and about 4.8% in volunteer fire duties. And you can see that those lines have decreased. We did have an increase of fire duty hours in some of our stations, and you can see some of those things are related to how Some of those things are related to career staff being there because it gives the volunteers opportunities to run calls then. And also we see cycles, like specific like at Company 6, we had an entire family join fire rescue. So the entire family is volunteering now. So we see slight increases there. And as the sheriff said in his slide, with the calls for fire rescue, they've gone up 7.72% in 2017. The age and the size of the fleet continues to be a challenge, and future diverse development in the county. We're seeing, 3- and 4-story wood frame garden apartments go up. We're seeing highly industrialized areas come into the county. We're seeing large residential structures, a variety of different types of demographics and structural elements are coming into the county. Our residents' expectations are changing. When people move from another locality into Goochland County to think that they're going to get some more land, bigger house, their expectations sometimes are the same as where they just left. If they were used to when they hang up the phone from dialing 911, hearing the sirens in the distance, that's the level of service that they want. If they were used to a fire truck showing up with 3 or 4 people on it, that's the level of service that they want. If they call in and say chest pains on the phone, they expect an ALS unit to be there, not a BLS unit there. So our residents' expectations are changing as well. Our training demands are going up. Our people are asked to do more higher level skills, higher levels of training. And our future outlook is consistent staffing. Our goal as a fire rescue department from the administration standpoint is to have 5 people in our stations 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. What that does and allows us to do, and we don't care if they're volunteers or career, but that's our goal, is to have 5 people there 24/7. That allows us to handle 2 emergencies. If an ambulance call comes in, 2 individuals can go out on that ambulance. It still leaves 3 people there for if a fire call comes in. And it gives us some ability to respond to those things. Because the way it is now, if a 2-person crew is there for an ambulance and that ambulance goes out in Haydensville, they have no fire resource or an EMS resource anymore, because the whole resource is gone. So our goal is to get to that 5-person level, and I'll have a slide here that illustrates what you've been able to assist with here in a minute. We also have we want to start a Citizens Fire Academy. As you saw with the sheriff's slide, he had a 25th anniversary of the Sheriff's Academy. We're going to steal some of his thunder. We know there's people out in the community that want to learn more about their fire rescue department. We want to use it as a recruitment tool for our volunteers, and we want to start a Citizens Fire Rescue Academy. We hope to do that in the late spring or early summer of this year. As the sheriff also said, you built that nice new building for us. We need to be able to take full advantage of that. So that means that we need to outfit it appropriately. We need to train our citizens. We need to train our EOC workforce to be able to work within the confines of that structure to maximize its output when needed. The sheriff also talked about the EMD. That's going to be a collaborative effort, the emergency medical dispatch. There will be a phased-in approach. It'll take a little while to get to there, but we're working collaboratively with the sheriff's office and our occupational medical director to find the best system that works for Goochland County and maximize its delivery to our citizens. As you heard me say, that 70% of our volunteers in the east end of the county don't live in the county. Currently, the only incentive we give to our volunteers is a break on taxes or a sticker for their car, which I say sticker, the fee for the sticker. If you don't live in Goochland County, that probably doesn't mean anything for you. So we need to look at other incentives that would attract more volunteers and give them an incentive to work out here in Goochland County as a volunteer member of our organization. That could be anything from tuition reimbursement, a college live-in program, a variety of different things, up to and including stipends for running calls. So we need to look at those types of things so we can continue to enhance and continue to attract volunteers. We need succession planning for both our volunteers and career members. Bill McKay is going to age out of his position. Tommy Carter at Company 5 has been in the organization for over 50 years. We're not going to be around forever. Eddie Ferguson might be around forever, but I don't know if all of us will be. And we need to make sure that we have a succession plan going forward for both our volunteers and career individuals. And we need to look at an internal review of our existing requirements for promotion. Those things are old, they're dated, they're not representative of the 21st century fire rescue department. Social media is a huge tool now, both positive and negative. And we need to improve our social media presence, because that's oftentimes the only way people are getting information now. And in the times of emergency, we as a local government need to recognize that, and we're going to need to step up to the plate in making sure that we have social media presence. We also need to use it as a learning tool, as a tool for training. Remember I said it's the emergency, the best one is the one that never occurs. If people don't want to sit in a classroom, how can we use social media to teach them about life safety education at home and being better prepared for an emergency that may occur? As I said, our goal is to have 5 people in each station 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we understand that that is a lofty goal, and that with the decline in volunteerism, that the only way we can basically predict and ensure that is by increasing the amount of career staffing in place. The chart you see in front of you does not get to that goal. That chart in front of you gets to a goal of having 3 career people in each station 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with the assumption that they will continue to be supplemented by volunteer resources. We believe that there's a job for everybody in fire rescue. You may not be on the ambulance, you might be fundraising. You might be a training officer, you might be a logistics officer. So we will continue to have a need for volunteers within Goochland County for decades. Not years, but decades going forward into the future. So the chart that you see is something that we've laid out going forward over the next 5 years to help us get to that point of 3 people in each station 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I believe you've seen this before, and I believe the county administrator's projections for budgets going forward takes this into account with the mandates for the fiscal constraints that he may have. As I said, things change. Synthetics equal rapid fire spread, cancers, and occupational illness. We talk about trying to attract volunteers to continue to join Goochland County Volunteer Rescue Service. If I told them that they had a 3 times greater chance, or told an individual they have a 3 times greater chance of contracting cancer than if you worked at Lowe's or Home Depot or something like that, do you think people are going to volunteer? Probably not. They'll probably steer away. There'll always be those adrenaline junkies who, like I was when I was a young kid and wanted to get into this line of business. But someone who has responsibility, a family, payments of a house, they're not going to get into this dangerous line of business, especially if they know they're going to contract cancer. Where am I going with this? What we have done to our homes has made it less safe in our homes today than it was 30 years ago. 30 years ago, when your smoke alarm activated, you had 17 minutes to get out of your home. That number has been decreased down to 3 to 4 minutes because of the stuff that's inside your house. The stuff that's inside your house. No longer is it natural fibers, no longer is it natural material. It's all synthetics. Synthetics put off toxic known carcinogens, and they burn hotter and faster than anything we've seen before. 8,000 BTUs per pound of fuel used to be the standard. It's up to 24,000 pounds. Tremendous amount of heat, tremendous amount of energy in a very short period of time. I said our environment is changing, and we talked about the gear and everything else that we need. A couple of slides here I just want to point out to you. The top left is lightweight wood frame constructed buildings. The same type of construction that has been used in our apartments here within Goochland County, the same type of construction that's being used in the residential components that are coming into single-family homes in Goochland. Our gear has to be better than it's ever been before. The picture in the center on the top is a picture of my son. My son was wearing his gear, brand new gear purchased in 2016 by his employer. He was caught in a flashover situation and was severely burned. I got the call at 4 o'clock in the morning from him, "Hey Dad, guess where I am? I'm in the burn center at Washington Hospital Center." I'm happy to say he's completely recovered. He's completely recovered, he's back to work. But his burns were catastrophic. And what he told me was, "Dad, the conditions were fine right now." And within seconds, it changed to where it was untenable. And he was fortunate enough that he was able to get into a point of refuge, but he still got severely burned. So where am I going with this is our gear has to be able to sustain that thermal climate that we're operating in. Top right picture, unfortunately, we see too much of that. Our firefighters have to be able to train to deal with those active shooter situations that were in mass casualty situations. Ebola virus hit us a couple of years ago. All of a sudden, it had gone away, and then it comes back. And like that. We had to go and react to that because it was here in the States. And unfortunately, the bottom right is naloxone, opioid overdoses. It's here in our community. Several of us, I don't know, Ms. Laskala, can you tell me what the count was on Saturday for attendance?
I don't know, what do you think, 100?
Maybe 100 folks attended a seminar over the high school on the opioid crisis that exists, not just within society, but it's here in Goochland County. We've had several overdoses. All of our BLS and ALS units, all of our staff cars are equipped with this, and we can hopefully get there in time and reverse those opioid overdoses. Bottom line is our volunteer and career members need the training and equipment to respond to the challenges of today and tomorrow. And it goes without saying that we appreciate your continued support. And I'll be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions for the Chief?
Mr. Chairman, can I just mention, Chief talked about the revenue recovery and our work with the Volunteer Association Board. We've been working pretty much since I got here to try to work with them to clarify the levels of responsibility that the county has to cover operational expenses and what their funds are used for. I really do have to say I appreciate the efforts of the leadership of the Volunteer Association to work with us on that. At the end of the day, we will actually be covering a little more than what they would have seen historically, but I think it's a fair trade-off for the level of service that they've been providing for us. It's now much clearer what we will cover versus what they will cover. And so, and I really do thank the association leadership for working with us through that process, and Chief, your leadership in that process. I think it's going to serve both of us well for a long time to come.
Yeah, at the end of the day, just to dovetail on what the administrator said, we want our volunteers to focus on being on that piece of emergency apparatus. We don't want them to have to focus on how many pies they're going to sell or how many portraits they're going to sell or those other things. We're very appreciative of the level of service we get dollar-wise from the board. The volunteers are very fortunate that they have a tremendous base out there that they can call up and say, hey, we need money for this, we need money for that. At the end of the day, though, we need people on the fire rescue apparatus. That's the most important thing. It doesn't do any good to write thousands and thousands of dollars of checks if our apparatus is going out understaffed and under not able to do the mission.
Other questions or thoughts for the Chief? Chief, I see the personnel staffing going up as you continue to face a challenging environment and a shifting environment, and
Yes, sir.
And perhaps staying out in front of that, or at least keeping up with it. There are some increased numbers. We heard from the sheriff that some of his positions are going unfilled because of the lack of qualified candidates. With these additional positions that are currently in the proposed budget, would you foresee any difficulty in being able to fill those positions, or is that have you had a dissimilar or a similar experience to the sheriff in terms of your ability to find qualified candidates?
We don't seem to have the significant problem that the sheriff's office has. What we do have is a retention problem. We don't offer the opportunities, as the sheriff alluded to, that the Chesterfields, the Henricos, and some of the other larger departments do for both. Pay we're very good at, but upward mobility we're not. We don't offer our individuals a lot of personal growth and advancement. So we will do a better job of that going forward. Part of that is just the evolutionary process that we are in now. So we continue to lose people to organizations that run more calls, have those upward mobility opportunities, and have more diverse, specialized teams that some individuals are looking for. We're a shameless plug right now, and I don't want to take up anybody's more time. We're actively soliciting both volunteer and career members. The Human Resources Department is advertising for people who are interested in becoming possibly career members right now. So if you're interested, fill out your application. And I think April 17th is going to be our test, I believe. That's the date. So, but no, we don't seem to have a problem getting folks in the door. It's a retention problem that we have right now.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you. Anything else for the Chief? Well, I'm just going to thank you again for all the excellent work that you do, and all the folks that work in our fire safety department and EMS to keep this county safe. Especially you guys actually do save lives. People talk about it, but you guys actually do it. So thanks very much for that, and appreciate all you do. And we look forward to working together as we go through the budget.
Thank you.
So,
We appreciate
thank
your
you.
support. Thank you.
Next up is our animal protection.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Tim Clough. I'm the Director of Animal Protection, and thank you for the opportunity to present Animal Protection's budget to you this afternoon. I want to begin with our 4 primary functions, first and foremost being the prevention of the spread of rabies to humans and domestic animals. We also ensure that all domestic animals in the county are treated humanely and provided adequate care. We enforce all state and local animal welfare laws, and we maintain the animal shelter and find permanent homes for unclaimed animals. Some of the goals for animal protection is to continue to provide public safety services while striving to reduce response times, continuing to find forever homes for all adoptable animals entering the animal shelter, continue to reduce the number of rabies incidents in domestic animals through education, law enforcement, and providing periodic low-cost rabies clinics, and becoming operational in the new animal shelter facility. I think most of the citizens are aware of our animal shelter project that's ongoing right now. Of course, myself and staff are very excited about this project. It is a CIP project at a cost of $4.9 million, which includes $1.25 million in donations from Goochland pet lovers. Mr. Badesky alluded earlier in the afternoon, this facility is going to be 10 times the size of our current facility, so there will be a lot of experiences that we will get into and learning how to operate this facility, and a lot of our increased costs are for personnel to run this facility. So there will be an increased expectation of services to include additional open hours at the animal shelter. We also will see an increased expectation of compliance with and enforcement of local animal welfare ordinances, more stringent state mandates, and also volunteer engagement, retention, and training as it relates to shelter operations. I want to speak to you about some of our performance measures. As you will see, I am presenting our performance measures in a calendar year instead of a fiscal year. The reason for that is that I also have to report to the Virginia Department of Agriculture, and they require me to give them in calendar years, so I want to be consistent when citizens see those numbers. Number of animals impounded at the animal shelter for calendar year 2017, actual numbers was 490 animals. We expect an increase in 2018 and 19. That increase is due to population increase, but also due to the fact that we will be able to accept surrendered animals at the new facility. So we will see an increase of animals coming into the facility for that reason. And that is a service that we've been able to only provide at a very limited basis up until the opening of the new shelter. Number of county dog license purchased. Actual calendar year 2017 was 3,484 dog license purchased. We expect that number to increase also due to population increase and also due to enforcement in the field by our officers. Number of calls for service per animal protection officer. Actual calendar year 2017 was 313 calls per officer annually. We hope to reduce that number to 266 by adding an additional animal protection officer. And then we will, of course, see that number increase as time goes on. Decreasing the number of calls per officer does reduce our response times, which is one of our goals. Number of notices to comply issued. Notice to comply, there are our written warning system. We issued 96 notice to complies in calendar year 2017 with an additional officer. We hope to increase that number to 127. The notice to comply is a good program for us. We're always looking to gain compliance with animal welfare ordinances. And if we can avoid having to issue summons and gain compliance, we like to do that. Of course, if an individual doesn't follow through with what we ask them to do, then we would follow up with a summons. The final performance measure I wanted to define a little bit for you. It's our save rate percentage, and that is the total intake of animals divided by 3 categories combined, which are animals reclaimed by an owner, transferred to a partnering private animal welfare organization, or adopted from our facility. Our actual 2007 save rate percentage was 82%. I did pull the figures for the state average for public animal shelters, which was 76%. So we are above the state average. We would really like to increase that number 2% each year. This slide shows our requested additional funding. Most of it is in personnel. As you'll see at the bottom, you'll see that we're going from a split full-time, part-time employee ratio to 7 full-time employees. One of those requested positions is an additional animal protection officer at a cost of $71,000 for salary and benefits, and a capital expenditure of an additional truck for the new officer, which is $36,000. It's very similar to what the sheriff alluded to earlier, that an officer the cost is around $110,000. We would like to also convert the shelter supervisor position from a 32-hour full-time position to a 40-hour full-time position at a cost of $7,500, and convert the shelter attendant position from a part-time to a full-time with benefits at a cost of $22,995. And that is to become operational in the new facility with the amount of space that will need to be cleaned, disinfected, and the increased number of animals and presence of citizens in the building, and also increased hours. Operating cost increase are related directly to the new animal shelter. We're anticipating an electric increase of $21,500 and a water sewer increase of $3,500. And I'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Clow? Yeah.
If you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, so one of the measures that you said at the beginning, one of your objectives is the rabies?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any statistics on that?
I do not have them with me. I'd be glad to get those to you on the number of calls.
Well, what's your sense? I mean, is it up, down?
It is actually up this year. That's typical for the East Coast, is where we see rabies flow up and down the East Coast.
Right.
So you'll have an active 2 years with a slow 2 years in between. We're in the middle of an active 2-year period right now.
Okay, right. Yeah, if you've got that, that would be
Absolutely.
Just for curiosity.
Yes, I can get
that'd
that
be
to
great.
you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Yep. Great job. When's the estimated completion?
Fall of this year.
Fall of this year?
Things are moving
Bet
along.
you can't
yes.
wait.
We can't.
That'll
We're
be great.
excited.
We're looking forward
Fiscal
to
year
it.
19.
Fiscal year 19.
Fiscal 19.
If it keeps raining, I
Oh,
promise you
no.
anything.
I like it better.
We're striving for it.
That's
All
for
right,
sure.
super. Thanks again
Thank
for
you.
all you do.
Thank you for your
Take
support.
care. Yep. Okay, Barbara, I guess you're going to walk us through some requests.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Barbara Horlacher, Director of Financial Services, and I'm going to wrap things up here with our statutory requirements. We have some public hearings that are required as part of the budget process, and then we have advertising requirements. So our public hearings will be held on April 3rd. We plan to have several public hearings that night. The first public hearing that we'll have that night will be on the real property tax rate, and that public hearing will begin at 7 o'clock on April 3rd. And I'm just going to roll through these, and then we can do one motion at the end. The second public hearing will be on the Tuckahoe Creek Service District ad valorem tax rate, and that will be a separate public hearing. It'll be separate but the same night. We'll open and close. Then we will have a public hearing beginning at 7:15 on April 3rd. That will be the county administrator's budget, the school budget, the capital improvement program, all other tax rates. And that public hearing will also include fees. We'll be talking about those as our presentations continue, and utility rates, water and sewer volume and service charges. And then lastly, on that same evening of April 3rd, starting sometime after 7:15, we will have a public hearing on an ordinance to amend a section of the county code to remove the provision that requires that the ad valorem tax rate public hearing be held on a separate date from the county's budget hearings. So are there any question on those public hearings?
It goes without saying, and I just think what we're proposing is rates that are the same rates that we have, no tax on the
Right.
TCFD and our property tax rate. Per code, you're not allowed to increase them at this point unless you advertise a new public hearing. You can decrease, but you cannot go for an increase. So our residents should take some comfort in that that we're not proposing any increase, and should there be any thought of such, we would have to go through a whole new advertising process.
Right.
Meet the timeframes, but that's not in any way, shape, or form being proposed.
And the form of the advertisements is in your packet, so I didn't include that in the slides tonight, but the form of the advertisement does say that a lower rate, but we will be advertising at the 53 cents current real estate tax rate and the 32% ad valorem tax rate, and all other rates will stay the same. We've talked a little bit about water and sewer fees, and we'll talk about those more next week. And then the two fee changes that we'll talk about more, but one of them was brought up tonight to actually lower the deferral of the public hearing fee, and the other fee change is to add a fee for special events when fire and rescue personnel are required.
Okay, do we have questions for Ms. Harlacher? Let's see, I guess she had one more. That was the fees for fire rescue. The last one was the water and sewer. Okay. Are there any questions? Just to recap or go through this, all of the request to advertise for public hearing, all of these public hearings would be on
April 3rd.
April 3rd.
Correct. Some of them require separate public hearings, so we will actually open and close
A
different.
separate meeting
Not a separate
or
meeting,
just a public hearing?
separate public hearing.
Same meeting, separate public hearing, but all on April 3rd.
Correct.
Yes, and we even have two different hearing times because there's a state law requirement that says they have to be at a separate time than your budget.
Same meeting, but different times. That's usually the case. We don't usually have two microphones. Okay, I'm just trying. All right, let's keep the humor to a minimum here, I guess, which is always the case around here. Okay, so all of this would be on the same evening, but some of them will be staggered in time. But again, from all the items you just mentioned, we're not making any decisions here right now. All we're doing is
you're
setting
just
public hearings.
making a motion to set the recommended public hearings and to advertise as required by law. Some of these require 30 days of advertisement, some less, but in order to make the 30-day deadline, we have to ask for that tonight.
So this complies with all the statutory requirements for advertising and
Correct.
In advance of the public hearings.
Correct.
Okay. Any questions? Did that clear it up or did that muddy it up? Right. Okay. It's just me then. Okay. All right.
Make this motion.
Yes, good.
It's been
Now,
a long night, so.
Thank you, Ms. Wallacker. If there's no other questions for her, I've got one for Ms. McGee, I guess, procedurally here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 public hearings. Can we consider these as a group with one motion, or do we need to take separate motions?
For tonight, in order to just authorize that they be set, there is no reason why you cannot just ask to move in favor of all the items as presented.
Okay, great, thank you. Is there any other questions? Last opportunity, going once? Okay, if there's no other discussion or questions, thank you, Barbara, appreciate that. I'll go ahead and entertain a motion if someone's prepared to make a group motion here.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, I move that we authorize the public hearings outlined in our agenda today. They're shown as item 2643, 2662, 2644, 2648, 2647, and 2649. All public hearings set for April the 3rd as outlined.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? It's been moved in second. Any additional discussion? All right, seeing none, I don't think we need a roll call vote on this. We'll just do a voice vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. I believe that's the last item on our agenda for today. Our next scheduled board meeting would be on Tuesday, February 27th, a week from today, at 3 p.m., which is an additional budget session. And the next regularly scheduled meeting will be on Tuesday, March 6th, 2018, starting at 11:30 with an audit and finance committee, and then moving on to 1:30 for Central High School ribbon cutting ceremony, and following up at 3 o'clock with our regularly scheduled meeting, and 7 p.m. for the public hearings and any other business to come before this group. With that, is there any other business to come before this body? Seeing none, I will declare us adjourned. Thank you for coming.